A struggling mother saved a boy lost in a snowstorm. She has no idea who his father is. Hours later, a luxury car stops in front of her house, and their eyes meet. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Nicole Mitchell pressed her shoulder against the front door of her small two-bedroom house, fighting the gust of cold wind that pushed back. Snowflakes clung to her coat and hair, leaving behind a thin, glistening layer of ice. It was nearly 8 p.m., and the Denver winter felt harsher than usual. She stomped her boots on the doormat, hoping to rid them of some of the snow and slush. Once inside, she exhaled with relief at the comforting warmth, though the old heating unit rattled with every gust of wind outside. She hung her coat on a creaky wooden hook by the door, then glanced toward the living room. Stacks of textbooks and worksheets were spread across a small desk shoved against the wall, remnants of the lessons she had prepared earlier in the day for her special education class. On the coffee table sat a few medical bills, their bright red urgent stamps, an unsettling reminder of her overdue obligations. "Mom?" called a gentle voice from the hallway. Her daughter, Carol, stepped into view, leaning slightly on a crutch. At just 10 years old, she already carried herself with a quiet resilience. She had undergone knee surgery a few months before, and while her mobility was improving, pain still lingered in her eyes on the tougher days. "I'm home," Nicole replied softly, managing a warm smile. She kissed the top of Carol's head, noticing how her daughter's brown curls had grown since the last time she'd trimmed them. "How's the knee?" Carol shrugged. "Stiff, but okay. I did my exercises like you showed me." "Good job. Thanks for being so responsible," Nicole said. She set her worn-out purse on the kitchen counter and started rummaging through the fridge, searching for something to make a quick dinner. Since payday was still a week away, her options were limited, some leftover vegetable soup and half a loaf of bread. As she ladled soup into 2 bowls, her mind returned to the conversation she'd had earlier with Mrs. Thompson, the landlord, about the late rent. The older woman had been polite yet firm, reminding Nicole she was nearly 2 months behind. Nicole, a 36-year-old single mother working as a special education teacher, tried not to let the weight of her financial troubles show in front of Carol. Still, the stress was constant, creeping into her thoughts at every opportunity. "How was school?" Nicole asked, carrying the bowls to the small dining table and placing a napkin beside each one. "It was good. I finished reading that story for language arts, and I got an A on the quiz," Carol replied proudly, settling into a chair. "Mrs. Lewis told me to pass along her regards to you. She says you're one of the best special ed teachers she's ever met." Nicole felt her cheeks warm with a touch of pride. That was nice of her. She's a good teacher herself. She blew gently on her soup, glancing out the window as wind roared through the dark neighborhood. The meteorologist had warned of a dangerous snowstorm, urging everyone to stay indoors if possible. A small shiver passed through her, one she couldn't quite attribute solely to the cold. It might have been the worry about the overdue bills or the flickering memory of her own childhood after she lost her father. She vividly recalled how lonely she'd felt in those days, how she'd promised herself that if she ever had a child, she would do everything in her power to provide security and comfort. Despite her current struggles, she felt she was doing the best she could. After dinner, Carol returned to her bedroom to rest her knee and practice a few gentle stretches. Nicole remained at the kitchen table, sorting through the day's mail. Her eyes lingered on a hospital envelope containing new charges for Carol's follow-up care. She took a deep breath and resolved to talk to the hospital's billing department in the morning, hoping for a possible payment plan extension. Outside, the wind became even fiercer, rattling the windows with an unsteady rhythm. She found herself standing in the living room, gazing at the swirling snowflakes that flew past the street lamp. There was a subtle sense of unease in the air, an intuitive feeling that the night held something more than just another winter storm. She sighed, turning off the main light and leaving a small lamp on. With Carol resting, Nicole turned her attention to the scattered textbooks. Each belonged to her special education class, where her passion and creativity truly shone. She had a knack for working with children who faced communication challenges, especially those with autism or other developmental differences. The school's budget constraints made it hard to get the supplies she really needed, and she often improvised with homemade materials. Walking past the window again, Nicole paused, noticing how the wind whistled ominously. A sense of urgency pricked at the back of her mind. She decided to leave on the porch light a little longer, as if anticipating something or someone out there in the dark. She couldn't fully explain why she felt so uneasy, but she trusted her instincts. In her experience, storms sometimes brought more than cold air and ice. They could usher in unexpected moments that changed everything. She cast one final glance at the quiet street before drawing the curtains, determined to push aside her worries and get some rest. Yet in the pit of her stomach, she sensed that the calm she clung to was on the verge of shattering, and that her simple world, a world already weighted by overdue rent and medical bills, might soon be stirred by forces she could not foresee. Nicole awoke to the sound of howling wind, unsure if the noise that roused her was the storm outside or a distant cry. She lay in bed, heart pounding, listening carefully. The bedside clock read 2:15 a.m. and a dull ache radiated across her temples. She wondered if stress alone could conjure phantom sounds. Then she heard it again, a faint, distressed moan woven into the wind. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, slipped on her slippers, and pulled on the thick robe hanging from a hook. Cautiously, she made her way toward the living room. Through the thin curtains, she saw nothing but swirling snow under the porch light's weak glow. By now, her pulse raced. She deliberated whether to check outside or call the police. Could it be an animal? A stray dog, maybe, but something in the cry felt too human. She thought of Carol and weighed the risk of leaving her alone, if only for a minute. With trembling hands, she grabbed her cell phone and unlocked the front door. Stepping onto the porch, she was almost knocked backward by the ferocity of the wind. Snow stung her cheeks like tiny needles. The glow from her porch light barely pierced the swirling darkness. Straining her ears, she caught a louder wail coming from somewhere near the fence at the edge of her small yard. She took tentative steps down the snow-covered porch steps and followed the sound. Her slippers were immediately soaked, but she pressed on, keeping one hand on the rail to steady herself. As she neared the fence, her eyes adjusted enough to see a small figure hunched against it. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a child, no older than 8, dressed in a coat that appeared expensive, yet was dusted with snow and ice. He was shivering violently, his head bowed, arms wrapped around his knees. Nicole's motherly instincts roared to life, overruling her own trembling fear. Kneeling beside him, she gently touched his shoulder. "Hey, sweetie," she said, her voice quavering. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" He gave no answer. In the faint light, she could see his eyes were open, but they stared blankly forward, as though trapped in a silent world of his own. His lips were blue, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. Alarm jolted Nicole. She knew hypothermia was a genuine threat in conditions like these. "Can you stand?" she asked, though she wasn't sure if he could understand. He didn't respond, but she gently lifted him. To her relief, he managed to stand, albeit unsteadily. Without another thought, she wrapped an arm around him and guided him toward the house. Inside, the warmth enveloped them both like a soft blanket, though it was hardly toasty. The old heating system hissed in protest as Nicole cranked up the thermostat. She locked the door and helped the boy out of his soaked coat. He was small, with pale skin and dark hair sticking to his forehead. Judging by his silent demeanor and distant gaze, she guessed he might have special needs. Without wasting another second, Nicole fetched dry towels and a spare set of Carol's old pajamas. She rummaged in the hallway closet for extra blankets. As she wrapped him up, he let out a soft whimper, still shivering. She murmured reassuring words, though she sensed he wasn't truly engaging with her voice. Carol, awakened by the commotion, poked her head around the corner. "Mom, who is that?" she asked, eyes wide. Nicole glanced over. "I'm not sure. He was outside, near the fence. I think he might have gotten lost in the storm. Could you warm some blankets in the dryer for me?" Carol nodded, disappearing into the laundry nook. Meanwhile, Nicole gently pressed her palm against the boy's forehead. He was icy to the touch, so she rubbed his arms and legs to stimulate circulation. Her mind raced. Should she call 911 right now? But the storm was raging, roads were likely impassable, and even if first responders could get through, it might take hours. She decided to try anyway. Flipping her phone open, she dialed, and the call dropped after a few rings. She tried again, and it went straight to a recorded message about high call volumes and poor signal. Anxiety prickled at the back of her neck. She resolved to keep him warm, monitor his temperature, and watch for any signs of serious distress until help could arrive. Guiding him to the couch, she propped him up against the cushions and slipped a soft pillow behind his head. The boy's gaze roamed the room, not exactly focused, yet not entirely vacant. Nicole whispered, "It's okay, you're safe now," though she had no idea if he could comprehend or respond. With trembling hands, she checked his pulse, faint but present. She felt a surge of determination. In her 5 years as a special education teacher, she had learned to recognize certain behaviors and body language cues, especially in children who struggled to communicate verbally. He showed many signs that made her suspect autism, but there was no time to confirm it. She needed to stabilize him first. Another fierce gust of wind rattled the windows, and Nicole swallowed a knot of anxiety. She wasn't sure who this child was, why he was alone in a snowstorm, or how she would keep him safe until help arrived. But she did know one thing. She couldn't turn her back on him, not now and not ever. Nicole sat on the floor beside her couch, her back against the armrest, doing her best to steady the boy's breathing. Every now and then, his chest shuddered, and she felt compelled to press a hand lightly to his shoulder, as if her gentle touch could anchor him. Carol had placed a warm blanket from the dryer around him, and the heat of the fabric had helped reduce his violent shaking. Outside, the storm continued its relentless assault. Snow piled against the windowsills, blocking much of the weak moonlight. The living room lamp cast a soft, flickering glow, revealing the worry etched into Nicole's face. She recalled the training sessions she had attended for dealing with autistic children prone to sensory overload, though they had never touched on what to do if you found one half frozen in a blizzard. She carefully reached for her phone again and tried dialing 911. This time, the call connected briefly, long enough for her to give her address, before static took over. A recorded voice crackled something about emergency lines being overwhelmed, and then the call ended. Nicole slumped in frustration. That might have been enough information for first responders to locate her, but she had to assume they were contending with countless other emergencies. Carol stood nearby, hands clasped. "Mom, will he be okay?" she asked in a hushed voice. Nicole nodded, though her expression betrayed uncertainty. "I'm doing everything I can for him," she said, beckoning for Carol to come closer. "Help me check his temperature again." They worked together to tuck a digital thermometer beneath the boy's arm, which rested limply against his side. His eyes remained open but distant, as though peering into a world separate from theirs. Within moments, the thermometer beeped softly, indicating that his body temperature was still low, dangerously so, but not dropping further, which gave Nicole a shred of hope. As the minutes stretched on, the boy began to stir, his limbs loosening. Occasionally, he made soft sounds, something between a hum and a moan. Nicole spoke to him in a gentle tone, introducing herself quietly. "My name's Nicole. This is Carol. You're safe here." She offered him a small cup of lukewarm water, helping him sip. Though his eyes flickered, he offered no verbal response. In her training, she'd encountered students who communicated through gestures or picture cards. Others used sign language or specialized apps. She realized she had no tools on hand to support him like she would in her classroom. All she had was her intuition and experience, yet even that felt inadequate under these dire circumstances. "Carol," Nicole said softly, turning to her daughter, "I need you to get the big comforter from my bedroom, the fluffy one. It'll be warmer than this blanket." Carol hurried off and returned a minute later with a thick comforter. Together, they draped it around the boy. Nicole remembered the instructions for warming someone with hypothermia: gradual heat, avoiding anything too hot, and continuous monitoring. She felt overwhelmed, but pushed through, focusing on her calmest instincts. The boy stirred again, a small tremor passing through his body. Nicole took a deep breath. "If only the lines weren't down," she murmured. "I'd call an ambulance. The roads are probably blocked anyway." Carol lowered herself next to her mother, gingerly resting her sore knee. "What if we drive him ourselves?" Nicole gazed at her daughter, weighing the option. "It's so bad out there, honey. If we get stuck in a snowdrift, we'd just be risking both our lives and his. Maybe if the storm eases up in a few hours, we can try." A wave of uncertainty washed over her. She was just an ordinary woman, juggling overdue bills and a demanding job. She felt ill-equipped to handle a medical crisis, but she also knew she couldn't ignore a child in danger, especially a child who might not even be able to speak or advocate for himself. She tried shifting the conversation to reassure herself. "He seems to respond when I talk quietly. That might mean he's used to gentle voices. Let's keep the noise level low, okay?" Carol nodded solemnly. They sat there, the faint light illuminating the boy's pale cheeks. Nicole recalled a moment from her own past. When she was about Carol's age, her father had passed away suddenly, leaving her mother to navigate the chaos alone. It was the memory of that helplessness that sparked the same fierce protectiveness she felt now. Time crawled onward, punctuated by the raging wind outside and the soft ticking of the living room clock. With each passing minute, the boy's breathing steadied a little more, and Nicole clung to the hope that he would come out of this crisis safely. Yet worry gnawed at her. Where were his parents? Were they also out there in the storm, looking for him? He blinked, slowly moving his gaze around the room. A fleeting spark of recognition flickered in his dark eyes when they landed on Nicole, as if he sensed her empathy. She squeezed his hand gently, and he allowed it, though he didn't grip back. A weighty sense of responsibility pressed against her chest. She was doing everything in her power, but the task was monumental. She tried to quell her anxiety by focusing on practical steps, keeping him warm, continuing to attempt calls for help, monitoring any signs of worsening health. The storm showed no sign of letting up, but she refused to let fear dominate her thoughts. For the moment, the living room had become a makeshift sanctuary. Carol's presence provided a quiet reassurance, and the boy, though silent, became the anchor for Nicole's determination. She knew, deep down, that she had to see him through this night, no matter how long the hours stretched or how fierce the storm became. Morning arrived slowly, painting the grey sky with faint streaks of light that barely penetrated the still raging storm. Nicole hadn't slept. She sat huddled by the couch, glancing at the boy whose breathing had finally settled into a calmer rhythm. Carol had dozed off against the armchair, her injured knee elevated on a pillow. The house felt quieter than usual, even with the wind rattling the walls. Nicole's thoughts buzzed. She'd been trying to call emergency services and local hospitals every hour, but the calls dropped or rang endlessly. News broadcasts played on her small TV in the background, reporting multiple road closures and accidents. Denver's mayor had declared a snow emergency, urging everyone to stay home unless absolutely necessary. She rose to stretch her stiff legs, carefully stepping around Carol. Her mind was a swirl of conflicting duties, as a mother to Carol, as a caretaker to this unknown boy, and as a teacher who should be reporting to work. She eyed her phone for any missed texts from the school district. A single message blinked. Classes cancelled due to severe weather. Small relief, but the rest of her problems remained unresolved. Noticing the boy was awake, she approached cautiously. He looked around the room, a hint of confusion in his expression. She wondered again if he had autism, his avoidance of eye contact, the muted reactions, the subtle rocking movement she'd seen him make earlier. She tried a soft greeting. "Good morning, sweetheart. Are you feeling any better?" He said nothing, only turning his head slightly to watch her. Nicole tried not to let the silence unnerve her. In her classroom, she had taught students like this, children who relied on non-verbal communication. She recalled a technique involving short, simple sentences combined with gentle gestures. Keeping her voice low, she pointed to herself. "Nicole," she said, tapping her chest. Then she pointed to Carol, still sleeping. "Carol." When she pointed to him, he merely blinked, his lips parted as though words might come but didn't. She wondered if he understood. Suddenly, he shifted, tapping his fingers against the blanket in a rapid, rhythmic pattern. Nicole recognized this as a possible stim, self-soothing behavior common in autistic children. She let him continue without interruption. Interfering might only increase his anxiety. Carol stirred, slowly opening her eyes. She spotted her mother kneeling beside the couch and pushed herself upright. "How is he?" Nicole looked back at her daughter. "Better than last night," she said softly. "He's awake and alert, but still not speaking." Carol nodded, then gingerly stood, testing her weight on the injured leg. "We should try giving him something to eat, maybe?" Nicole agreed. He must be hungry. They scoured the kitchen for something easy to digest. Plain toast, some applesauce, a bit of oatmeal. While Carol warmed the oatmeal on the stove, Nicole prepared water in a small plastic cup with a lid, hoping to make it easier for the boy to drink. She brought these items over to him, demonstrating with simple gestures. He watched her carefully but didn't resist when she guided a spoonful of oatmeal to his lips. He swallowed, then turned his head away after a few bites, indicating he was done. Quietly, Nicole spoke to Carol. "We need to keep track of his fluid intake. He was likely dehydrated from being out in the cold. I'm not sure how long he was there." Carol listened attentively, though Nicole could see concern clouding her daughter's gaze. The entire situation was beyond the scope of normal for them both. They had never sheltered a lost child, let alone one with special needs during a record-breaking blizzard. But Carol showed no sign of fear, just empathy and resolve, qualities that sometimes made Nicole feel both proud and deeply aware that her daughter had grown up faster than most kids. The TV news anchor's voice droned in the background. Nicole caught words like historic snowfall, massive power outages, and advisory to remain indoors. She flicked her eyes to the window. The wind still hurled sheets of snow across the yard. Any idea of driving the boy to the hospital seemed impossible right now. Her phone buzzed. She lunged for it, hoping it was emergency services. Instead, it was Mrs. Thompson, the landlord. The voice on the other end was terse. "Nicole, I know there's a storm, but rent doesn't stop for snow. You said you'd pay part of what you owe by the end of this week." Nicole closed her eyes, inhaling. She couldn't tell her landlord about her predicament, not in detail, but she also couldn't pretend nothing was wrong. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm dealing with an emergency right now," she began. "Once this storm passes, I promise I'll figure something out. Her words trailed off. Mrs. Thompson gave a tight sigh. "Fine, but I can't hold off forever. As soon as the road's clear, we'll need to speak in person." Ending the call, Nicole felt her shoulders sag. The pressure weighed on her. A landlord demanding overdue rent, a vulnerable child in her care, and no tangible way to reach a hospital. She glanced at Carol, who had been quietly watching from across the living room, sensing the tension. Trying to dispel the heaviness, Nicole slid onto the floor beside the couch. She gently placed a hand on the boy's arm. "I promise we're going to get you help," she said in a soothing tone. "We just need to wait out this storm. We're doing the best we can." She thought about what might happen if no one came for him. Did he have parents searching frantically? Her chest tightened at the possibility that he might be alone in the world. Yet her intuition told her that a child wearing such a pricey coat likely belonged to a family with resources. So where were they? The sound of the wind roared again, as if it refused to let them forget it was still in control. Nicole checked Carol's posture. She was standing tall, arms crossed. Despite the worry etched on her face, Carol seemed steadfast. It was almost as if her daughter's calm presence infused Nicole with renewed resolve. They had no choice but to keep going, to keep the boy warm, fed and calm until the worst of the snow subsided. Even though that might be hours away, Nicole understood one thing. The situation was changing her life in ways she couldn't yet articulate. Something about this child, his silent plea for safety, and the savage storm swirling around them felt like the start of a new chapter she hadn't asked for, but was determined to see through. Afternoon light attempted to filter through the dense cloud cover, casting a muted glow on the neighborhood. The wind had died down, but the snow continued to fall steadily, blanketing everything in a thick layer of white. Nicole stood by the window, phone in hand, checking for any improvement in signal strength. The slightest bar flickered and then vanished, dashing her hopes of contacting emergency services or the police. She turned to see Carol quietly reading in the corner, while the boy rested on the couch. He had stopped shivering a while ago, which Nicole took as a positive sign. He occasionally glanced around with fleeting curiosity, but still made no verbal sounds. She suspected that even if his speech was limited, he might be trying to communicate in other ways. She needed more time and better resources to figure that out. Carol set her book aside and approached. "Are you still going to try to drive him somewhere once the storm eases?" she asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Nicole nodded. "Yes, if it becomes safe to do so, but I'm not sure when that'll be. The roads are probably buried under snowdrifts." She paused, her gaze shifting to the boy. "For now, we just have to keep him comfortable. I'll keep trying to call for help, though." Her eyes fell on her daughter's leg, recalling how Carol had injured herself on the school playground 6 months ago. The memory brought back the sense of helplessness she'd felt, the fear that as a single parent she couldn't provide everything her child needed. She had to rely on a medical payment plan that was still strangling her finances. Perhaps that lingering worry fueled the protective instinct she felt now toward this lost boy. Grabbing a fleece blanket from a cabinet, Nicole moved to the couch. Gently, she laid it over the boy's legs. He touched the edge of the fabric, as if registering its softness, and she caught a glimpse of something in his expression. Was it curiosity, or a tentative form of gratitude? Sensing the moment, Nicole spoke in a calm, rhythmic tone. "This is a blanket. It'll help keep you warm." She tapped her chest again. "Nicole." Then she pointed to Carol. "Carol." Her voice was patient, free of expectation, as she gave him space to absorb her words. He ran his fingers along the blanket, then briefly looked up, not directly meeting her gaze, but acknowledging her presence. Though fleeting, it filled Nicole with hope. She was on the verge of shaping a new kind of connection, one that might allow him to feel safe despite the unfamiliar environment. Minutes later, the sound of a vehicle outside made her tense. She rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain. Through the falling snow, she saw headlights piercing the wintry gloom, edging slowly down the road. It was a large SUV, moving cautiously. Nicole's heart leapt. Could it be help arriving? She dashed to the front door, yanking it open as the driver braked in front of her house. A tall man, dark hair mussed, suit jacket askew, stepped out. He shielded his eyes from the snow and hurried up the porch steps, nearly losing his footing on the slippery boards. "Excuse me," he called, voice taut with desperation. "Have you seen a little boy around here? He's about 8, dark hair, wearing a black coat. I've been looking everywhere." He broke off abruptly as Nicole stared at him, her own astonishment plain. She realized that in her rush of relief, she hadn't said a word yet. Finally, she found her voice. "Is your son autistic?" she asked, tone careful but urgent. "Non-verbal, possibly?" He nodded, eyes shining with worried intensity. "Yes, that's him. I've been driving through these streets for hours. He ran off during the storm. I went to the police, but they're swamped with calls. One of my employees knew someone on this street, thought maybe—" He shook his head, unable to finish. Nicole stepped back, opening the door wider. "He's here," she said softly, motioning him inside. The stranger exhaled in raw relief, brushing past her. Nicole swiftly closed the door behind him to keep out the cold. Carol, who had jumped up from her chair, stood protectively near the boy. When the man saw his son lying safely on the couch, he let out a choked sound, a mix of gratitude and disbelief. He rushed over, dropping to one knee. "Gary," he whispered, taking the child's hand. Gary's gaze flickered toward him, though he did not speak. Nicole saw the tremor in the man's shoulders. She'd witnessed parents' raw fear and profound relief before, but never in such dire circumstances. In the hush that followed, Nicole felt a swell of relief herself. She'd been prepared to care for Gary through the night, not knowing if anyone was even searching. Yet here stood his father, as desperate and lost as Gary must have felt. The tension within the small living room seemed to crackle with unspoken emotion. Looking up, the man's eyes met Nicole's. "I don't know how to thank you," he managed, voice wavering. "I'm Christian Bennett, Gary's father. If you hadn't found him—" Nicole offered a faint, reassuring smile. "He was freezing when I brought him inside. I'm just glad he's okay." Carol cleared her throat gently, drawing attention. "We did our best to keep him warm," she added. Nicole placed an appreciative hand on her daughter's shoulder. Christian looked between them, clearly noticing the modest surroundings, old wallpaper, second-hand furniture, the worn state of Nicole's clothes. An unspoken question hung in the air. How did someone in such difficult circumstances manage to do something so kind and extraordinary? Nicole sensed the magnitude of the moment. She had made a choice to care for a lost boy, potentially risking her own safety by venturing into the storm. Now, seeing Christian's tearful gratitude, she felt the weight of that choice shift into something else, an unexpected bond that she wasn't sure how to define. With Gary safe for the moment, and the storm still blowing outside, their gaze lingered on each other. Nicole suddenly realized that her decision to take a single step out into the freezing night had thrust her into a situation that might change her life in ways she could never have anticipated. She closed her eyes briefly, offering a silent prayer of thanks that she'd found the boy in time. And standing there, with Carol at her side and Christian Bennett kneeling beside his son, she began to sense that this was no random encounter. Something deeper connected them, something that went beyond the biting wind and drifting snow. A quiet stirring in her heart hinted that the trials of the storm were only the beginning of a new and uncertain path that lay ahead. The morning sun struggled against heavy clouds, and a fresh layer of snow had settled over Denver's streets by the time Nicole woke. She found Christian in the kitchen, sipping coffee and gazing out the window. He'd insisted on staying overnight in case Gary needed anything, especially with the blizzard making travel nearly impossible. The tension in his posture had eased somewhat, though worry still underlined his expression. Carol was up too, yawning as she came into the room on her crutch. The kitchen felt cramped with 3 people moving about, yet there was a sense of calm that replaced the frantic worry of the night before. Nicole busied herself heating oatmeal, recalling how the boy had managed a few bites when she'd first brought him in from the cold. "How's Gary?" she asked Christian softly, sliding a mug of coffee toward him. "He's asleep," Christian replied. His voice was slightly hoarse, as though he hadn't fully recovered from the relief and anxiety. "He's resting well. I checked on him before coming in here." Nicole nodded, her gaze flicking to the living room, where Gary lay curled under blankets on the couch. She hoped he would find safety and comfort in her home, for however long he needed to remain there. Though awkwardness lingered, given they were essentially strangers, there was also a mutual understanding in Christian's eyes whenever he glanced at her, as if they shared an unspoken agreement to focus on Gary's well-being above all. The phone rang. Startled, Nicole hurried to the living room to answer it, pausing to check that Gary was still peacefully asleep. "Hello?" A familiar voice answered. "Nicole, it's Sophia. Are you and Carol all right with this storm?" Relieved to hear from her friend and colleague, Nicole smiled. "We're safe. Listen, something extraordinary happened. I found a boy out in the storm. Turns out he's the son of Christian Bennett." "Christian Bennett, the tech investor." Sophia's tone reflected both surprise and intrigue. "Yes," Nicole replied. "He's here, along with his son." "Well, Gary's asleep at the moment, but Christian stayed to make sure everything was okay." "That's something else," Sophia said, letting out a low whistle. "Look, I tried calling you yesterday, but the lines were down. I've been worried. The roads to our neighborhood are still blocked, so I'm not going anywhere soon. But what about you? Do you need anything?" Nicole leaned against the wall, eyeing Carol in the background as her daughter examined the living room tidying efforts. "We're running low on groceries, but we'll manage for now. I'm more concerned about Gary. He's non-verbal, and I suspect the transition back to his home environment could be tough after such a traumatic event. Also, Christian's a widower. He's handling a lot on his own." "I'd love to help," Sophia said kindly. "I've worked with nonverbal kids before, and remember, I'm just a phone call away. Sometimes having someone else to bounce ideas off of can make a big difference." Nicole recognized the warmth and wisdom in Sophia's words. She recalled the times they'd collaborated on lesson plans for special education students, sharing tips and methods. Sophia was one of the few people who truly understood the complexities of Nicole's work and her heart. "Actually, I could really use your advice on some techniques for supporting Gary. If you have a moment, I'd like to discuss it." "Absolutely. Let's talk it through," Sophia agreed. Nicole flipped the phone to speaker mode, setting it on the coffee table. She and Sophia began exchanging ideas, referencing strategies like sensory toys, visual schedules, and calm communication. Christian wandered in, listening quietly at first, but soon asking specific questions about how to manage meltdowns or encourage Gary to express his needs. Sophia's voice carried a reassuring tone. "Nicole, you have a unique gift for this. Don't doubt that. And Christian, I know this probably feels overwhelming, but you're doing the best thing you can by ensuring Gary's comfort and safety right now. Sometimes the smallest gestures build the biggest trust." Christian nodded thoughtfully, glancing at Nicole. "I appreciate that. I'd do anything to see him happy again. He hasn't been the same since—" His voice trailed off, but Nicole sensed the familiar pang of grief. The conversation shifted gently, giving him space to process his emotions. Eventually, Carol joined, offering her perspective as a child who'd been around some of Nicole's special ed students. She mentioned how the kids in her mom's class often responded to consistent routines. Sophia chimed in, reinforcing the idea that structured environments were critical for many children on the spectrum. Nicole felt a surge of gratitude for Sophia's steady guidance, though the distance between them, created by snowed-in roads, forced them to rely on phone calls. It somehow brought them closer in spirit. She realized this was the mentor figure she needed right now, reminding her that she wasn't alone in trying to help Gary. Sophia's experience and calming influence fortified Nicole's own resolve. With their discussion winding down, Sophia reassured them she'd check in again later. After hanging up, Christian exhaled. "She seems like a great friend, and you clearly know your stuff." There was genuine admiration in his tone. Nicole offered a half-smile. "She's been my colleague and sounding board for years. I'm no expert, but I've taught enough classes to see how kids on the spectrum need a certain type of approach. Patient, flexible, every child is different." She glanced at Gary, stirring slightly on the couch. "I hope we can figure out the best way to help him heal." Christian nodded. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about his future." His gaze flicked over the humble furniture, the teaching aids Nicole kept around. "Honestly, I'm impressed with how much you've done already." For a moment, the two shared a quiet respect that transcended their vastly different worlds. Nicole, a teacher struggling to pay bills, and Christian, a wealthy tech philanthropist, had found an unlikely common ground: the fierce devotion to a child's welfare. As the warmth of that realization settled in, Nicole felt her earlier anxiety loosen its grip on her heart. Gary stirred more awake, blinking at them. Nicole got up, ready to apply the strategies she and Sophia had just discussed, determined to provide the boy a comforting space. This was a new step beyond simply surviving the storm. She sensed a greater journey was beginning, one that she couldn't undertake alone. Nicole's street remained a maze of snowbanks for 2 more days, but the sky finally began to clear. Crews rumbled through in plows, shifting massive drifts aside so residents could reach essential services. As soon as the roads were passable, Christian arranged for a private nurse and a driver to pick up Gary, hoping to ensure he received a thorough medical checkup. Nicole watched from the living room window as a sleek, dark SUV parked out front, her nerves prickling with a strange mix of relief and hesitation. Part of her welcomed the help. Gary needed professional care beyond what she could offer in her modest home. Yet she couldn't deny the pang of sadness at the thought of him leaving. The boy had grown comfortable with her and Carol, and his father seemed to trust her instincts. "I appreciate everything you've done," Christian told her when the nurse entered to examine Gary. He looked oddly formal in a crisp button-down shirt, as though bracing for a business meeting rather than a farewell. Nicole nodded. "He's a resilient kid. He made it through that storm, and he's got you." Christian's gaze faltered. "Sometimes I'm not sure I'm enough. Gary's mother passed away 2 years ago. Since then, he's had trouble connecting with anyone. I work so much, and I hate leaving him in the care of strangers. When he ran away the other night, I realized I've been failing him." Nicole softened her voice. "You're not failing him. You found him, and you're trying your best. That's what matters." He drew a slow breath, though the tension in his shoulders remained. Outside, the nurse confirmed Gary's temperature was normal, and his vital signs were stable. Carol lingered near the hallway, biting her lip. She'd formed a gentle bond with Gary, sharing her old storybooks and small crafts. Nicole caught her daughter's eye and saw the unspoken sadness there. The nurse completed a quick assessment, and with Christian's assistance, Gary was carefully helped into the SUV. Nicole waved, keeping a supportive smile plastered on her face. She and Carol stood on the porch, shoulders brushing together as they watched the SUV drive away. Snow crunched under its tires before it turned at the corner and disappeared. Carol exhaled shakily. "I hope he'll be okay." Nicole patted her back. "I'm sure he will." Christian seems determined to give Gary whatever he needs. They stepped inside, and an uncomfortable quiet settled over the house. It felt emptier somehow, like the traces of Gary's presence left an echo in the living room. Neither Nicole nor Carol knew quite what to do with themselves at first. Nicole tidied the blankets on the couch, noticing the faint imprint where Gary had lain. She wondered if she'd ever see him again, then pushed the thought aside, reminding herself that the main thing was his safety. That afternoon, Nicole received a call from her school's principal, Mrs. Merrick, informing her that classes would resume the next day. The principal also hinted that budget cuts might be coming, which meant Nicole's special education class could face constraints. With a weary sigh, Nicole jotted notes about adjusting lesson plans to accommodate fewer resources. It was a harsh reminder of her everyday reality, a reminder that her life and her challenges had not paused for this extraordinary event. The following morning, she slipped back into her routine. She helped Carol get ready, made coffee in her small kitchen, and skimmed news headlines that spoke of the storm's aftermath. As she drove to school, weaving carefully through partially cleared roads, her mind lingered on Gary's silent gaze. She had assumed, once she returned to her usual life, the whole ordeal would feel like a distant memory. Instead, it felt more like a prologue to something bigger. That feeling was reinforced when her phone rang during her lunch break. Christian's name flashed across the screen, sending a small jolt through her. She stepped away from the staff lounge to take the call. He sounded composed, yet earnest. "Nicole." "Hi, Gary's doing well. The doctors said he's fine physically, just a little frazzled from the ordeal. I wanted you to know I'm grateful." Warmth spread through her chest. "I'm so glad he's okay, really." Christian hesitated, then continued. "Your approach with him made more difference than you realize. He's had trouble bonding with anyone since his mom died, but he seemed calm with you. And there's something else." Nicole's heart quickened, half expecting bad news. "What is it?" "I discovered you've been pioneering some unique teaching methods for children with special needs. I did a little digging, and teachers at your school spoke highly of your work. It seems you're onto something that could help many kids, not just Gary. I'd like to learn more." She almost dropped the phone. "I'm flattered, but it's really just a mix of known approaches. I adapt them for each student." "However you describe it," Christian pressed on, "I see potential. I'm interested in exploring ways to support or fund your ideas." Her mouth went dry. All at once, images of updated classroom supplies and smaller class sizes flooded her mind, things she'd dreamed of but never had the means to pursue. She cleared her throat. "I'm open to discussing it, of course." "Great. I'll organize something soon," he said, his tone decisive. "For now, take care. I'll be in touch." Hanging up, Nicole stared at the phone in wonder. It felt as though she was stepping out of the comfort of her normal life, one marked by financial worries and a quiet existence, into a territory that promised opportunity but also risk. A part of her wanted to retreat, to question whether any of this was real. Another part, the part that recognized the power of bringing real change to kids like Gary, urged her to move forward. She gathered her things and headed to her next class, mind whirling with possibility. There was no turning back. The ordinary world she knew had already started to fade in the rearview mirror. The weather had stabilized by the time Christian scheduled a meeting at a downtown Denver cafe. Nicole arrived early, hands clutching a small folder filled with notes and printouts of her teaching materials. The cafe buzzed with conversation and clinking cups, its warm light and modern decor a stark contrast to the stark winter outside. She seldom ventured to this side of town, a financial district dotted with high-rises, designer boutiques, and restaurants she usually considered out of her budget. She settled at a corner table, trying to steady her nerves. Her reflection in the gleaming window revealed a woman of 36, who looked both hesitant and intrigued. Her practical outfit, a modest sweater and slacks, felt slightly out of place among patrons in tailored suits and polished shoes. She reassured herself that she belonged here for the sake of her students. Christian arrived a few minutes later, removing a sleek overcoat that dusted fresh snow onto the floor. He wore a neatly pressed shirt and slacks, but he offered a genuine smile that eased some of Nicole's anxiety. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I ordered us coffee. Hope that's all right." "That's perfect," Nicole replied, fighting the urge to glance around nervously. "I brought some materials to show you. It's mostly outlines of how I adapt different techniques for my students on the spectrum." Christian leaned in, his attention fully on her. "I'd love to see them. Also, I invited someone who works with me to join us. He's an educational consultant I hired after Gary's diagnosis. He's been researching effective strategies for years." Nicole nodded, rearranging her folder. A moment later, a tall, slightly older man with thinning grey hair approached. He smiled politely, extending his hand. "Morning, Miss Mitchell. I'm Dr. Leonard Jackson. I've heard good things about your work." She shook his hand, heart fluttering with a mix of pride and apprehension. "Please, call me Nicole." "It's a pleasure to meet you." They settled around the table, coffees arriving with a swirl of steam. Nicole spread out copies of her lesson plans. She showed them how she used visual aids tailored to each child's specific interests, short video clips to reinforce routine in and tactile objects for sensory regulation. Christian listened with rapt attention, occasionally looking to Dr. Jackson for insight. "This is impressive, Doctor," Jackson noted, tapping a page that detailed a music-based approach Nicole developed. "Did you study music therapy?" "Not formally," Nicole admitted. "I took a few music classes in college and discovered that rhythm and melody can hold a child's focus in a unique way. I tested it with small groups and saw promising results." Christian nodded in agreement, his gaze thoughtful. "Gary reacts positively to music, especially repetitive, soothing melodies. It's often the only thing that calms him during his more intense sensory episodes." Nicole offered a small smile. "I've noticed that's a common thread for many autistic children. Predictable rhythms can be grounding." Dr. Jackson cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair. "I see real potential in implementing these approaches more broadly. However, to scale it, you'll need resources, specialized staff, adapted classrooms, updated technology." Christian exchanged a knowing glance with him, then turned to Nicole. "Which leads me to why I asked for this meeting. We've looked at various educational programs that aim to serve neurodivergent students, but rarely do they integrate multiple techniques under one cohesive method. Your approach, while it may seem ad hoc to you, actually fills a gap. Nicole's heart thudded, equal parts excitement and fear. She could sense a major opportunity unfolding. What exactly do you have in mind? Christian folded his hands atop the table. I want to propose a pilot program in a few public schools in Denver, using your techniques. My foundation can fund the necessary equipment, training, and any specialized staff needed. That is, if you're willing to coordinate it. His words hung in the air, heavy with promise. Nicole swallowed, recalling the rundown classroom she'd been teaching in. How often she'd daydreamed of fresh supplies, better teacher-to-student ratios, and modern technology. Yet she also felt an undercurrent of doubt. Was she ready for such a large-scale initiative? It's an incredible offer, she managed, voice steady despite her pounding heart. I just want to make sure it's done right. These kids need consistency and empathy, not a quick-fix approach. Dr. Jackson nodded. We agree. We're not looking for a flashy PR campaign. We want real results, and we believe you have the capacity to deliver them. Christian leaned forward slightly, his voice warm. I know this is sudden, but after seeing how Gary responded to you, I'm convinced you have something special. If it works, so many children and their families could benefit. Nicole stared at her notes, imagining what it would look like to bring her ideas to hundreds of kids across the city. Her pulse quickened. I need to think about it. But I'm interested, she said, glancing up, meeting Christian's gaze. I'm definitely interested. He gave a faint smile. I understand. Take the time you need. We can arrange a more formal proposal soon. They agreed to continue the conversation, exchanging contact information. As they stood to leave, Nicole felt as if she'd stepped into an entirely new world, one where her dedication to teaching might become something bigger than she ever imagined. The cold air greeted them outside, a reminder of the city's frigid winter. But as Christian hailed a cab for Dr. Jackson, and they said their goodbyes, Nicole's mind raced with possibilities. She sensed a thrill, a spark of hope that could challenge every doubt she'd carried. Nicole's next few days blurred with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She continued her usual responsibilities, guiding her special education class, grading papers, and caring for Carol. Yet beneath it all, the idea of launching a pilot program pulsed like an undercurrent. She couldn't shake the image of improved facilities, better training, and the potential to transform education for children with special needs. One afternoon, as she was tidying her classroom, she heard a gentle knock on the door. Sophia peered in, wearing a broad smile. Mind if I come in? Of course, Nicole said, heart lifting at the sight of her friend. I was about to call you. I have news. Sophia slipped inside, eyes darting around the bright posters and adaptive learning tools Nicole had pinned to the walls. Looks like you're as prepared as ever. So, spill, what's going on? Nicole explained the encounter with Christian and Dr. Jackson, her voice brimming with excitement and a hint of anxiety. She outlined the pilot program idea, how it could bring new resources to underfunded schools and implement the blend of methods she'd been crafting for years. When she finished, Sophia's grin widened. Nicole, this is amazing. You've always said if you could just have the support, you'd revolutionize how kids with autism are taught. I know, Nicole admitted, chewing her lower lip, but it feels so big. What if I fail? What if I let everyone down? Sophia placed a firm hand on Nicole's shoulder. You won't fail. You'll learn, adapt, and keep pushing forward. That's what you do. And consider this. If you do nothing, you'll always wonder what might have been. Nicole smiled, warmed by her friend's unwavering faith. That's true. Honestly, I'm more worried about juggling everything. Carol's health, my own finances. I'm already behind on rent. How can I invest the energy needed to run a pilot program? Maybe this program could help you financially in the long run, Sophia pointed out. You'd likely be offered a coordinator's salary. Plus, Christian Bennett doesn't strike me as the sort of man who ignores the personal struggles of someone he's depending on. Nicole flushed slightly, remembering Christian's concerned expression whenever he'd glimpsed the realities of her modest life. He did mention wanting to ensure I wasn't burdened, but still, I don't want to take advantage, Sophia chuckled. That's what's charming about you. You never assume you're entitled to help, but sometimes you have to accept it. They discussed the logistics until the hallways emptied. Eventually, Nicole locked the classroom and the two friends headed out together. As they passed through the school's front entrance, they were greeted by a small group of parents waiting in the lobby. One mother, whose child was on Nicole's caseload, approached. "Ms. Mitchell?" the woman said, holding her second grader's hand. "I just wanted to say thank you. My son made such progress this semester. He's using picture cards now, and he's talking more at home." Nicole bent to greet the boy, who responded with a shy smile. "I'm so proud of you," she told him. The mother expressed gratitude again, then left, her child happily chattering about something that made little sense to the untrained ear, but sounded like music to Nicole. As they exited the building, Sophia turned to Nicole, eyes shining. "See, that's the difference you're making already." Imagine expanding that impact. Later that week, Christian arranged for Nicole to meet a few potential stakeholders, public school board representatives and local community leaders, over dinner at a hotel conference room downtown. Nicole felt a wave of nerves as she approached the building, adjusting her coat collar and smoothing stray hairs. She'd never dined in such a refined setting for work. Christian greeted her in the lobby, offering a friendly smile. "Don't worry. They're just regular people, despite their titles. I'll introduce you." He guided her inside, where a few formally dressed individuals stood chatting. A tall, poised woman with salt and pepper hair approached. She introduced herself as Evelyn Richardson, a school board member overseeing special education initiatives. Nicole detected a warmth beneath her professional demeanor. Christian began explaining Nicole's background, her current role, and her hands-on expertise with autistic children. Nicole chimed in with details about her methods, trying not to sound too nervous. Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "We've struggled with budget cuts," Evelyn admitted, "but if Mr. Bennett's foundation is willing to support your pilot, I'll happily bring this before the board. You'll likely face scrutiny. People will ask for data, results, and accountability. But if you can show real impact, it might open doors." Nicole released a breath she'd been holding. "I understand. I'm prepared to work hard. I want these children to have the same opportunities as anyone else." As the evening progressed, Nicole found herself forming unlikely bonds with the stakeholders. A few parents who served on the board shared stories of their own kids with special needs. When Nicole spoke passionately about the breakthroughs she had witnessed in her classroom, they leaned in, intrigued and hopeful. Observing from a short distance, Christian looked pleased. Once the conversation shifted to the more mundane details of budgeting, he stepped closer to Nicole, quietly congratulating her on her composure. He seemed genuinely proud of how effortlessly she connected with the group. By night's end, the hotel staff began clearing plates and dimming lights, signaling the close of the evening. Some of the attendees promised to set up a formal review panel, while others exchanged contact information for follow-up meetings. Nicole clutched their business cards, both excited and slightly overwhelmed. Outside, the city lights sparkled against the dark sky. Christian offered to call her a cab, but she declined politely, deciding the fresh air might help her process everything. As they said their goodbyes, a subtle sense of camaraderie floated between them, bridging the gap between Christian's polished world and Nicole's more humble routine. When she finally made her way home, her mind raced. She had discovered allies, community leaders, fellow educators, and perhaps most unexpectedly, Christian himself. Though the road ahead felt uncertain, the collective belief they shared in the program buoyed her spirits. For the first time in ages, she could imagine a future for herself and Carol that wasn't overshadowed by financial woes and missed opportunities. A faint thrill replaced her usual anxiety, stirring the beginnings of genuine hope. A couple of weeks drifted by, punctuated by incremental progress on the pilot program. Nicole balanced her day job and late-night meetings to outline the structure with Dr. Jackson. Documents circled through emails, detailing training sessions, resource distribution, and timelines. It felt surreal to be at the center of such an undertaking, but each time Nicole second-guessed herself, Christian's supportive texts or calls buoyed her back up. During this whirlwind, Gary's presence in her life remained steady, though less constant. Christian arranged for Nicole to spend time with his son on Saturdays, an opportunity for Gary to practice communication exercises and for Nicole to observe his progress. Some sessions took place in the playroom at Christian's large house in a quiet Denver suburb. The first time Nicole arrived, she parked her aging sedan beside his immaculate SUV and exhaled. A grand Victorian-style home loomed before her, complete with a long driveway and tall hedges. She reminded herself she wasn't here to scrutinize Christian's wealth, but to help Gary. Still, the discrepancy in their lifestyles felt jarring. Christian greeted her warmly at the door, wearing casual jeans and a relaxed sweater. He led her through a spacious foyer with gleaming hardwood floors, past a living room adorned with tasteful artwork. Nicole's eyes darted across it all, and she couldn't help but think how different this was from her modest home. Yet Christian's demeanor remained gracious and unassuming. He guided her to a bright room full of natural light. A soft rug covered most of the floor, and shelves lined the walls, holding everything from sensory toys to puzzles and books. Gary sat on a colorful beanbag, gently pressing his fingertips against a tablet that displayed simple images. He glanced up when they entered. While he didn't speak, his eyes held a calm recognition. Nicole smiled gently. "Hey there, Gary. It's good to see you." She knelt down, offering him a small box of textured blocks. She tapped one, showing him the ridged surface. "Remember these? I brought them from my classroom. You liked them last time." He reached out, took one block, and started examining it with meticulous curiosity. A wave of relief washed over her. He was open to engaging, which was always a positive sign. Christian hovered by the doorway. "Let me know if you need anything." "I'll give you two some space," she nodded, setting up a simple sorting activity. Gary focused intently, occasionally humming. Nicole observed that he seemed less anxious than the day she found him in the storm. His hands trembled a bit, but he never seemed on the verge of a meltdown. Every so often, Gary would look up, meeting Nicole's gaze for the briefest moment before shifting back to the blocks. She encouraged him with soft praise and gentle guidance. The session passed quickly, culminating in a short break where she introduced a familiar tune on her phone, a melodic lullaby she'd used in her lessons before. Gary perked up, gently swaying in time with the song. Afterward, Christian returned, quietly amazed at how responsive Gary had been. "He's definitely more relaxed than usual," he commented, eyeing his son's comfortable posture. "I rarely see him this at ease with people outside our immediate circle." Nicole shrugged, though a small flush of pride tinged her cheeks. "It's a process. He's getting used to me. Trust is key, especially for kids on the spectrum who are nonverbal." Christian sighed, glancing at Gary. "I wish I could give him more time. My work schedule is insane." and I worry about missing these small moments of progress." She sensed the guilt in his voice. "You're here now. You're doing your best," she said gently. "Maybe once the pilot program starts, we can incorporate some of these techniques into your home routine, or train whoever's caring for him when you're away." They chatted about the upcoming pilot program and ways to integrate technology tailored for autistic students. Christian mentioned a new partnership with a software firm that specialized in communication apps. Nicole listened eagerly, floating ideas for customizing the app to suit different learning levels. After wrapping up the session, Christian suggested they all share a quick lunch in the kitchen. Nicole and Gary followed him through the house, stopping briefly to allow Gary to pick up a plush toy from a hallway shelf. When they reached the kitchen, spacious and gleaming with stainless steel appliances, Christian prepared sandwiches, passing one to Nicole. Over the meal, they talked about Carol and how she was recovering well from her knee surgery, finding new interests in art projects at school. Christian mentioned how he used to paint with his late wife in a small studio space, and a wistful look crossed his face. The conversation moved from the practical pilot program logistics and Gary's therapy sessions to more personal reflections about family, loss, and resilience. Something in the air felt easy, unforced. Nicole found herself laughing at a small joke Christian made about being hopeless in the kitchen. Gary calmly nibbled on bread, occasionally eyeing the adults with curiosity, as if trying to decode their banter. When it was time for Nicole to leave, she noticed Gary watching her pack her materials. She offered him a soft farewell, patting his hand gently. He didn't speak, but his calm demeanor said enough. Stepping back into her car, Nicole reflected on how, in a few short weeks, her life had intertwined with Christian's in ways she never imagined. They were linked by a shared purpose, helping Gary, and by extension, helping a multitude of other children. Nicole's growing confidence in the pilot program faced its first jolt when she received an unexpected call from her school's director, Mrs. Merrick. She had just finished teaching a morning class and was tidying up art supplies when her office phone rang. The uneasy tone in Mrs. Merrick's voice made Nicole's stomach clench. "Nicole, would you mind stopping by my office when you have a moment?" came the measured request. "We need to discuss your involvement with Mr. Bennett's initiative." Heart pounding, Nicole set the supplies aside and made her way to the office. Mrs. Merrick stood by her desk, arms folded. In her early 50s, with neatly styled hair and a reputation for strict adherence to protocol, she wore a serious expression that gave Nicole little comfort. "Thanks for coming," Mrs. Merrick said, motioning toward a chair. "I've heard about the proposed pilot program from the school board, and while I appreciate the potential benefits, there are concerns." Nicole perched on the edge of the seat. "I'd like to address any concerns you have. I'm still working out details with Christian Bennett's Foundation and Dr. Jackson, but I'm confident we can create a robust plan." Mrs. Merrick's lips tightened. "I understand the board's interest, but we also need to uphold certain standards. If this pilot ties into our school directly, we must ensure that everything meets district requirements, teacher credentials, oversight, budgeting, you name it." Nicole nodded. "We're not trying to circumvent any processes. Christian's Foundation wants to offer funding and resources. We'll adhere to all the guidelines required by the district." "I'm pleased to hear that," Mrs. Merrick replied, taking a seat behind her desk. "But there's another matter. Amber West, the caretaker Mr. Bennett hired for Gary, has approached me with concerns about your methods." She paused, gauging Nicole's reaction. Shock prickled through Nicole's veins. She recalled the tense moment weeks earlier when Amber had arrived to take Gary from her home during the storm's aftermath. "Concerns? I barely interacted with her." Mrs. Merrick flipped open a file on her desk. She questions whether your approach, which involves certain tactile and music-based exercises, is evidence-based or ethical. Nicole's pulse hammered. All my strategies are built on recognized techniques, she defended. I've studied under special education specialists. I might adapt them, but none are unethical. Mrs. Merrick folded her hands. I'm not accusing you of wrongdoing, but Amber insisted on filing a complaint with the school. She claims you might be exploiting the situation for personal gain, that you're ingratiating yourself with Mr. Bennett for financial or career benefits. Heat flared in Nicole's cheeks. That's not true, she said, trying to keep her voice level. I'm doing this to help children like Gary. Yes, there's potential for me to be compensated for coordinating the program, but it's not my motive. Mrs. Merrick exhaled slowly. I figured as much. However, these accusations could sow doubt among staff and parents, especially if Amber pursues them vigorously. Mr. Bennett has a lot of influence. Some view that as positive, others see it as a threat to public education's independence. Nicole rubbed her temples, feeling the stirrings of a headache. Is there a formal process to address these complaints? Mrs. Merrick nodded. Yes, we'll investigate. We'll collect testimonials, look at your track record, speak with parents. But I suggest you tread carefully. Public perception matters, and if Amber is determined, she could make things difficult. Rising from the chair, Nicole steadied her voice. I understand. I'll provide whatever documentation you need. The children's best interest is my priority. Always. On her way out, she passed a group of teachers in the hallway. They waved, friendly enough, but she couldn't help wondering if any of them had heard Amber's allegations. A tight ball of anxiety formed in her chest. She had anticipated rigorous scrutiny from the school board, but she hadn't expected a personal attack like this. Later that evening, Nicole sat at the kitchen table, her lesson plans untouched. Carol finished her homework quietly nearby. The house felt heavier than usual, as if the tension radiating from Nicole seeped into every corner. Eventually, her phone buzzed. Christian's name again. Her first instinct was to ignore it, not wanting to add to her stress. But she forced herself to pick up. Nicole, hi, everything okay? He asked, seemingly sensing her mood. She hesitated, then decided honesty was best. I got wind of a complaint from Amber. She's telling my school administration I'm using questionable methods and implying I'm exploiting your foundation's offer. It's ridiculous, but it's causing problems. Christian was silent for a beat. I'm sorry to hear that. Amber has been Gary's caretaker for months, but we've had issues. He never bonded with her. I had no idea she would retaliate like this. She's filing official complaints, Nicole explained. I'm not sure how far she's willing to go, but it could jeopardize the pilot if the school board thinks there's any truth to her claims. Christian's tone grew firm. I'll talk to Amber, and if necessary, I'll speak to the board members personally. I won't let her sabotage a program that could help so many kids, especially not because of some misguided personal vendetta. Nicole breathed a shaky sigh. Thank you. I just hate being caught in the middle like this. I know, Christian replied gently, but you're not alone. We'll handle it. Amber's not the final authority here. They lingered on the phone a bit longer, exchanging updates about Gary's progress. When the call ended, Nicole glanced at Carol and managed a faint smile. She recalled Sophia's reminder that new journeys seldom come without obstacles. Even so, the sting of false accusations left her uneasy. She attempted to refocus on her lesson plans for the next day, but her mind drifted to Amber's face, the hostility that had flared in the woman's eyes weeks before. Nicole couldn't shake the feeling that a storm of a different kind was brewing, one that threatened to derail everything she and Christian had worked for. Nicole stepped into the school hallway feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. Only a day had passed since she'd learned of Amber's complaint, but the news had spread quickly among staff. As she walked toward her classroom, a few colleagues offered supportive smiles or pats on the arm. Others avoided her gaze altogether, possibly unsure where they stood. The uncertainty weighed heavily on her. In her classroom, she found Sophia waiting by a wall covered in colorful charts and student projects. At first, Nicole's heart lifted. Her friend had a knack for comforting her, but the worried crease on Sophia's forehead hinted at bad news. "Hey!" Sophia greeted quietly, shutting the door. "I tried to get some insight on Amber's complaint from my contacts downtown. It's definitely causing a stir with the district. They've launched a preliminary review." Nicole set her purse on the chair, exhaling. "I expected as much. Mrs. Merrick said they'd investigate, but a preliminary review sounds ominous." Sophia gave a sympathetic shrug. "It's more procedural than anything, but you know how these things can snowball if not handled properly. The district wants to see you maintain professionalism, especially since Christian's Foundation could bring substantial funding. They don't want to risk a scandal." Nicole leaned against her desk, recalling how she'd spent half the previous night preparing folders of lesson plans, parent testimonials, and references in case she was asked to defend her methods. "I never wanted to draw this kind of attention. The main goal was to help kids like Gary." Sophia touched Nicole's shoulder gently. "Then focus on that. You have truth on your side. If you remain calm, they'll see Amber's claims lack substance." Before Nicole could respond, the first bell rang. Students began trickling in, some with bright smiles, others yawning sleepily. The routine of teaching provided a welcome distraction. She threw herself into leading a music-based activity, encouraging each child to move or tap along to a simple beat. By the time the final note faded, a few of her more anxious students appeared calmer, their eyes brighter. Midway through the day, she received a call from the main office. Mrs. Merrick requested her presence the moment classes let out. Nicole finished her lesson, then trudged through the corridors at dismissal time, dread coiling in her stomach. In Mrs. Merrick's office, the principal sat behind her cluttered desk, an unreadable expression on her face. "I just got off a conference call with the district," she began, gesturing for Nicole to sit. "They want you to provide a formal overview of your methods. They also want feedback from parents of your current students." "It's standard procedure, but—" Nicole nodded, steeling herself. "I'll gather everything I have, sample lesson plans, the data on student progress, and references from professionals who've observed my classes. I'm sure the parents will vouch for me." Mrs. Merrick tapped a pen against a notepad. "Good. Also, Mr. Bennett has contacted the district, apparently to clarify the nature of your collaboration. He made it clear that no personal gain for you was ever discussed, aside from a potential salary increase if you manage the pilot. They appreciated his transparency." Relief washed over Nicole, though it was tinged with caution. Christian's intervention could be a double-edged sword, helpful, but it might also feed rumors of favoritism. "Thank you for telling me," she said. After the meeting, she walked through the nearly empty halls. Her phone buzzed with a text from Christian. "Heard the district reached out. Don't worry, we'll handle this." She clutched the device, grateful for his reassurance. Yet a whisper of doubt lingered. She feared the gossip might only escalate, especially if Amber persisted in painting her in a negative light. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table, papers spread across every available inch. Carol quietly did her homework at the other end of the table, sending concerned glances Nicole's way. "Mom, is everything okay?" she asked after a while, setting her pencil aside. Nicole managed a small smile. "Just a tough time at work, sweetheart. Some people are questioning the program I'm working on." Carol studied her mother with an earnest gaze. "But you're helping kids, right? Like you helped Gary." "Yes," Nicole replied, her voice gentle. "That's exactly why I'm doing it. But sometimes adults get caught up in rumors and politics." Carol looked thoughtful. "Don't let them stop you." Nicole's chest tightened at her daughter's simple yet profound statement. In that moment, she realized she couldn't allow fear to dictate her actions. "I won't, honey," she said softly, pulling Carol in for a hug. "I promise." She stayed up late, compiling letters from parents who praised her individualized approaches. She found an old email from a parent whose child had been nonverbal for years, yet started speaking simple words after a semester in Nicole's class. Rereading these testimonies renewed her conviction. Her phone lit up at midnight, another message from Christian, asking if she needed anything. She typed back a quick note assuring him she was prepared, though her heart still fluttered with apprehension. At least he was on her side. Tomorrow would bring fresh questions and possibly more challenges. Yet, as she gathered the documents that proved her commitment and success, Nicole felt a surge of determination. She reminded herself that this was all for the children who needed a voice. Children like Gary, who depended on people willing to champion them despite bureaucratic hurdles. Nicole arrived early at school, her portfolio of evidence clutched in her arms. A biting wind swept through the parking lot, rustling the papers precariously. Once inside, she hurried to the conference room where the district-appointed investigator, Ms. Hampton, was waiting. A slight woman in her mid-40s, Ms. Hampton wore glasses perched on the bridge of her nose and exuded an aura of meticulous efficiency. "Ms. Mitchell?" Mrs. Hampton greeted politely. "I appreciate you coming in before classes." "This shouldn't take long." Nicole settled into a chair, trying to keep her nerves in check. "I understand. I want to clarify anything you need." Ms. Hampton flipped open a folder. "Let's begin with your background, your special education certification, practical experience, and any additional training you've pursued." Nicole handed over copies of her credentials, along with printouts of workshops and seminars she'd attended. She explained her hands-on experience in adaptive teaching. Ms. Hampton jotted notes, occasionally humming in acknowledgement. Then she asked more pointed questions. "Do you have a personal relationship with Mr. Christian Bennett that extends beyond a professional scope?" The question felt like a punch to Nicole's gut. She recognized the implication. She steadied her voice. "We've become acquainted through his son, Gary, who's in need of specialized educational approaches. But it's strictly focused on ensuring Gary's well-being, and now, potentially, helping other children through the pilot program." Miss Hampton nodded, her tone neither accusatory nor comforting. "And the allegations made by Amber West." Nicole inhaled slowly. "I can't speak to her motives, but her claims are inaccurate. My teaching methods are grounded in recognized strategies. There's nothing unethical or exploitative about them. She only saw me interact with Gary briefly, in a crisis situation. I doubt she has enough context to judge my methodology." Mrs. Hampton closed her folder. "We'll be speaking to parents, staff, and possibly Mr. Bennett himself. This is all routine procedure. If your methods are as you say, you have nothing to worry about." It felt like a dismissal, so Nicole thanked her and stood to leave. On her way to her classroom, she noticed Amber in the hallway. The caretaker stood near the staff lounge, talking to a couple of teachers who seemed uncomfortable in her presence. Her gaze flicked to Nicole, a hint of something smug curling her lips. Nicole forced herself to walk past without a word, though her heart pounded. A short while later, during a break, Sophia appeared in Nicole's classroom. "I passed Amber in the corridor," she muttered, rolling her eyes. "She's definitely stirring trouble. I overheard her telling Mr. Daniels that you're blinded by Christian's money." Nicole's jaw tightened. It's infuriating. She has no idea the sacrifices we make as teachers, barely able to cover rent and medical bills. If I wanted money, I'd have chosen a different career. Sophia laid a comforting hand on Nicole's arm. You're doing the right thing no matter what she says. Besides, there's no direct proof of wrongdoing. It's just her word against your track record. That afternoon, Nicole found some solace in her students. One boy named Dylan, who often struggled with focusing on tasks, responded remarkably well to the tactile block activity she'd borrowed from her sessions with Gary. Dylan's mother, Ms. Reeves, stopped by during dismissal. I can't believe the improvement I'm seeing at home, Ms. Reeves said, eyes shining. He's more engaged, even telling me about small parts of his day. Whatever you're doing, thank you. Nicole felt tears sting her eyes. I'm so glad to hear that. He's a bright kid, just needs the right approaches. Miss Reeves offered a warm smile. I heard about the new program you might start with that philanthropist. If you need any parent testimony, I'm happy to share Dylan's progress. Relief and gratitude flooded Nicole. I might take you up on that. Thank you. Late that evening, Nicole found herself at home, reviewing a stack of letters from other grateful parents. She smiled over each heartfelt note, letting their words fortify her resolve. Carol sat in her bedroom working on a school project, humming a tune Nicole had introduced to her students earlier in the week. Eventually, Nicole's mind drifted to memories from her own childhood. She recalled how lost she'd felt after her father's death, how she'd struggled to stay afloat while her mother juggled jobs to pay bills. Perhaps that was why she felt such a fierce calling to help children, especially those who lacked a clear voice. A longing to protect them from loneliness and misunderstanding burned in her heart. Outside, the wind rustled again, but Nicole barely noticed. She was deep in thought about her past, about Gary, about the potential of the pilot program. Amber's accusations loomed like a dark cloud, but she clung to the knowledge that her intentions were pure. If she had to prove that to the entire district, she would. The following week brought the kind of challenge Nicole had hoped to avoid. A formal hearing in front of a small district panel, part of the ongoing investigation. She arrived at the district's administrative building under grey skies, nerves on edge. Christian had offered to come, but official protocol limited attendance primarily to school staff and relevant district representatives. He promised to wait outside in case she needed support afterward. The hearing room was modest, a rectangular space lined with shelves of binders, smelling faintly of disinfectant. At a long table sat Ms. Hampton, joined by two other district officials. Mrs. Merrick was present, arms folded, face pinched with concern. Near the back of the room, Amber sat stiffly, her expression cold. A few parents of Nicole's students had volunteered to speak on her behalf. As they filed in, she felt a flicker of hope. She recognized Ms. Reeves, whose son Dylan had shown remarkable improvement, and Mr. Carter, whose daughter thrived on Nicole's music-based exercises. They offered tight smiles in her direction, a silent show of solidarity. "Let's begin," Ms. Hampton said, her voice formal. "We're here to assess the validity of Ms. West's complaint regarding Ms. Nicole Mitchell's teaching methods and potential conflict of interest with Mr. Christian Bennett's philanthropic initiatives." Nicole glanced at Amber, who kept her eyes forward, looking poised. When asked to summarize her complaint, Amber spoke in measured tones. "I observed Ms. Mitchell interacting with Gary, Mr. Bennett's son, after the recent snowstorm. She seemed very eager to gain Mr. Bennett's favor. My concern is that she's exploiting Gary's condition to advance her career. There's been talk of large sums of money from the Bennett Foundation, and I question whether Ms. Mitchell's methods are scientifically endorsed or if she's simply capitalizing on Gary's vulnerability." Fury bubbled in Nicole's chest, but she remained composed. When it was her turn to respond, she explained her credentials, her track record, and her motivations. She addressed the pilot program, emphasizing that any compensation was strictly professional and that her methods were based on recognized approaches. She passed out copies of lesson plans, references, and even an article featuring her classroom successes. Next, the parents testified. Ms. Reeves described how Nicole's teaching transformed her son's willingness to communicate at home. Mr. Carter praised Nicole's creative use of music, noting how his daughter's stress levels had drastically declined. Ms. Hampton and the panel listened intently, occasionally scribbling notes. Amber glanced down at her folded hands, her jaw set, but no one else jumped to her defense. Only Mrs. Merrick chimed in, cautiously reminding everyone that evidence-based research was paramount. Nicole took the opportunity to reiterate how her strategies had roots in established special education practices, adapted for individual needs. By the end of the hearing, Ms. Hampton thanked everyone and announced they would compile the testimonies, deliberate, and issue a recommendation to the superintendent. Tension thick in the air, the meeting adjourned. People began to gather their belongings, offering Nicole sympathetic smiles or brief words of encouragement. Amber slipped out quickly, ignoring Nicole entirely. Mrs. Merrick trailed after her, presumably to discuss next steps. Nicole stood alone, exhaling a pent-up breath. She felt like she'd run a marathon. The parents who supported her gave quick hugs, promising they'd do anything else needed. Though she was thankful for their help, the uncertain look on Mrs. Hampton's face lingered in her mind. Stepping into the hallway, Nicole found Christian waiting by a row of vending machines. He spotted her and crossed the distance in a few strides. "How did it go?" he asked quietly, brows knitted with worry. She shook her head, unable to disguise the exhaustion in her voice. "Hard to say." Amber stuck to her story. "I explained everything, and some parents backed me up. But we won't know the final outcome until the panel issues their recommendation." Christian frowned. "I'm sorry you had to face that alone." Nicole took a shaky breath, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "I'd rather not rely on you too much right now, or it might look like I'm simply using your influence. The district has to see I'm capable of standing on my own." He nodded, understanding. "Of course, but I'm still here for you, always." They left the building, the cold air hitting their faces. Nicole paused on the sidewalk, her eyes stinging. If the district rules against me, it could jeopardize everything. The pilot might be shelved, and my reputation would take a massive hit. Christian placed a hand on her shoulder. "I won't let that happen without a fight. If the district tries to shut us down because of baseless accusations, we'll appeal. My team of legal advisors will ensure we have every opportunity to prove your program's validity." Though his words offered some comfort, Nicole couldn't fully shake her anxiety. She remembered how battered she felt when Carol underwent surgery, how lonely it was to face hospital bills alone. Now, a different kind of threat loomed, one that could unravel her professional life, and it was all tangled up in a budding partnership she never asked for but had come to believe in so deeply. She drove home in near silence, trying to focus on the road instead of the what-ifs swirling in her head. Carol needed her strong and steady, and the children in her class depended on her optimism. She clung to that, even as the weight of Amber's allegations pressed down on her. Nicole arrived home to find Carol waiting at the front door, a slight frown knitting her young features. The winter sun had already slipped behind the horizon, leaving the porch light to cast long shadows. Nicole's heart ached at the thought of Carol worrying about her. The girl had enough on her plate, still recovering from her knee surgery and keeping up with schoolwork. "How did it go?" Carol asked softly, letting her mother step inside. Nicole closed the door, sighing. I did my best to defend my teaching methods. We won't know for sure until the district makes their decision. Carol nodded, her eyes skimming over the stack of papers in Nicole's arms. That lady caretaker, Amber, why would she lie about you? You helped Gary when no one else did. Nicole set her papers on the small kitchen table, the overhead light flickering. Sometimes people misunderstand or feel threatened, she said gently. Or maybe she just believes I'm stepping into her territory. She's been Gary's caretaker for a while, and maybe she's worried about losing her job. Carol's frown deepened. That's not your fault. Nicole ruffled her daughter's hair affectionately, though her smile was tinged with fatigue. No, it's not. But maybe it explains why she's doing this. Over a simple dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches, Nicole's phone buzzed, hoping it might be an update from Mrs. Hampton. She glanced at the screen. Instead, she saw the name Dr. Leonard Jackson pop up. Surprised, she answered, "Nicole, hello," came Dr. Jackson's calm voice. "Christian filled me in on the hearing. I'm calling to offer my support. I have data from my own research on early intervention programs that could bolster your credibility. If the district is on the fence, showing them more formal evidence may help." Relief spilled over Nicole. That would be wonderful. I have plenty of anecdotes and classroom documentation, but official research could sway them further. Exactly. I'll send you some published papers and also provide a summary of findings relevant to your methods. You can include them in any follow-up meetings or emails to the panel. After expressing her gratitude, Nicole hung up and told Carol about Dr. Jackson's offer. She saw a flicker of hope return to her daughter's eyes. "That's great, right?" Carol asked. "It is," Nicole replied, trying to keep her voice measured. "It shows more people are behind us." She set her phone down, mentally mapping out how to organize the new data. The next morning, she found an email from Dr. Jackson already waiting in her inbox, filled with links to studies and a concise overview. Though her schedule was busy, she carved out time during her lunch break to skim through the materials. As she read, her excitement grew. These studies, many from reputable journals, provided strong evidence for tactile learning, music therapy, and other interventions that matched her approaches. During a brief lull, she called Sophia, whose enthusiasm practically crackled through the phone. "This is exactly what you need," Sophia said. "Present it to Ms. Hampton. She'll see you're building on proven research." Nicole closed her eyes, envisioning the moment she'd be able to counter any skepticism with solid science. "I'll prepare a follow-up packet for the district panel, referencing Dr. Jackson's summary. Maybe it'll tip the scales in my favor." She hung up, feeling a renewed sense of possibility. The rest of her school day passed swiftly as she guided her students through a group reading activity, then a short interactive session using music. Their laughter filled the classroom, and she marveled at how these children, who each faced unique challenges, embraced a sense of freedom when given the right tools. That evening, as she compiled the new documents, her phone rang again, this time a video call request from Christian. She hesitated for only a second before accepting. His face appeared on screen, Gary perched on his lap. Although Gary didn't look directly at the camera, he seemed content, fiddling with a small plush toy. "Hi," Christian said, a hint of relief in his voice. "We just wanted to check on you, and Gary insisted on having the phone, so I figured a video call might help him feel connected." Nicole's heart swelled at the thought. "Hi, Gary," she greeted warmly. The boy paused, then tilted his head, perhaps recognizing her voice. Christian smiled, brushing back Gary's hair. "He's been calmer these days, more receptive. I've been playing that lullaby you recommended before bedtime. It really settles him." Nicole's cheeks warmed with quiet pride. That's wonderful. I'm so glad it's helping. When she mentioned the upcoming submission of new research to the panel, Christian brightened. That's good to hear, Doctor. Jackson told me he was sending something. I'm sure they can't ignore real data. They spoke a few more minutes about Gary's progress and the next steps for the pilot program, careful not to delve into anything that might be misconstrued as meddling in the investigation. Yet in Christian's supportive gaze and gentle tone, Nicole felt her anxieties ease. After they said goodnight, Nicole stared at her reflection in the phone's dark screen. Though she remained unsure of the district's ultimate decision, the unwavering support from Dr. Jackson, Sophia, and Christian gave her a flicker of optimism. Their collective efforts formed a shield that, for the moment, staved off the worst of her fears. She returned to her desk, the hush of her living room surrounding her, poring over articles, drafting letters, and reviewing testimonies. She pressed forward with a determination fueled by hope. Over the next few days, the district panel's official response remained elusive. Nicole tried her best to keep functioning normally, teaching her classes, juggling Carol's needs, and fine-tuning the draft for the pilot program. Still, a knot of tension clung to her, making sleep difficult. Midweek, she received an email from Miss Hampton asking to review the additional research from Dr. Jackson. Buoyed by her friend's encouragement, Nicole spent a late night assembling a thorough report, data-supported evidence, parental endorsements, and her own annotated lesson plans. She delivered the packet in person, leaving it with the district receptionist in a sealed envelope. The following day, Christian invited her to a brief meeting at a non-profit center he sponsored, which focused on assistive technology. She arrived just after work, still wearing her school attire and looking somewhat frazzled. Christian greeted her in the lobby, his expression a mixture of concern and warmth. "Everything all right?" he asked, gesturing for her to follow him to a small conference room. Nicole nodded stiffly. "Just tired, I guess. Waiting for the panel's decision is nerve-wracking." He offered a reassuring smile. "I understand. But I have faith in your work, and I'm confident the evidence you gathered will clear any doubts." Inside the conference room, a row of interactive screens lined one wall. Christian walked her through a demo of a new program designed for non-verbal children, a simple interface that allowed them to tap pictures or symbols to communicate basic needs and emotions. "I've been thinking about implementing this in the pilot," he explained, glancing at her for approval. Nicole tested the software, tapping icons to see how the system responded. Her eyes lit up with interest. This could be a game changer for kids who struggle with traditional communication, and the interface is so intuitive. Christian's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. If the pilot is approved, I'll make sure each participating classroom has access to this technology. It's the kind of resource schools can't often afford on their own." A wave of gratitude surged through Nicole, only to be tempered by a shadow of worry. "I just hope the district sees we're doing this for the right reasons, not to push some personal agenda." Christian stepped closer, folding his arms gently. "I'm aware they might suspect a wealthy donor's influence, but I've made it clear that the goal is to improve education for neurodivergent children." "That's all?" They stood there in a comfortable silence for a moment, the hum of electronic equipment surrounding them. She felt a faint tension humming between them, like an unspoken acknowledgement that their closeness had grown beyond mere collaboration. Yet neither of them addressed it directly. Christian cleared his throat. "Gary's in the next room with Dr. Jackson, exploring the software. Want to drop in?" "Absolutely," Nicole replied. They made their way to an adjacent space where Dr. Jackson knelt beside Gary, guiding him through a colorful screen. Gary's eyes were fixed on the display, his brows furrowed in concentration. Dr. Jackson demonstrated how a simple tap on a symbol of a glass of water could produce a spoken word, water. As Gary tapped it, the synthesized voice echoed the word, and Dr. Jackson offered an encouraging smile. "Good job, Gary. That means you want a drink." Gary glanced up at Nicole, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. She smiled brightly, stepping forward. "Hey there, how's it going?" She pointed to another icon, a small cartoon face wearing a smile. "Happy." Gary tapped it hesitantly, and the voice repeated, "Happy." Nicole nodded, her chest warming with pride. Even if Gary didn't fully grasp the concept of labeling emotions yet, this was a step, a small opening into interactive communication. Christian caught her gaze across the table, and she saw the gratitude in his eyes. "You were right about consistent reinforcement and gentle cues. He's taking to it faster than we expected." Before Nicole could respond, Dr. Jackson's phone chimed. He frowned at the screen, then turned to them. "I have to make a quick call. Give me a moment." As he stepped away, Gary continued tapping different icons with fascination, occasionally humming to himself. Nicole praised him softly, celebrating his progress without overwhelming him with too many words. They spent another half-hour testing the software and observing how Gary reacted. By the time they wrapped up, Nicole felt a sense of hope that temporarily overshadowed her concerns about the district's investigation. This was why she fought so hard, seeing a child's world expand bit by bit. Walking back to the lobby, Christian paused by a large window offering a view of the city lights beyond. Night had fallen, and the skyline glowed. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice subdued. "Being around you and Gary like this, it makes me realize how important these efforts are." Nicole nodded, heart fluttering at the earnestness in his tone. "I'm grateful too. And not just for your resources, but for believing in me." A moment passed between them, unspoken feelings simmering beneath the surface. Nicole tried to swallow the lump in her throat. The tension from the hearing was still real, but so was this growing closeness, tied together by a shared purpose and something more she didn't fully name. She finally tore her eyes away, gesturing toward the doors. "I should head home. Carol's waiting, and I have class prep to finish." Christian stepped aside, giving her space. "Of course. I'll walk you out." They left the building together, stepping into the cold night air. Nicole felt the weight of the unknown district decision pressing on her, but it was balanced by the evening's triumph, Gary's small step toward communication. Maybe that was enough to keep her spirit intact for whatever came next. A few days after Nicole's visit to the non-profit tech center, a letter arrived from the district office. It appeared unremarkable at first, an official envelope with neatly printed return information. But the weight of its contents pressed on Nicole's mind the moment she spotted it in her mailbox. She rushed inside, heart pounding, and carefully tore the seal. The district had scheduled an official assembly in the high school auditorium, inviting Nicole, school board members, and select community stakeholders to discuss the pilot program and finalize the investigation into Amber's complaint. Though part of her reeled at the thought of another public examination, she also recognized this might be her best shot at ending the doubts for good. She immediately texted Sophia and Christian, sharing the date and time. Within moments, messages of encouragement poured in. Sophia promised to rally supportive parents. Christian vowed he'd be there no matter what. Nicole felt a swell of gratitude, tempered by anxiety. This gathering had all the makings of a defining moment in her career. On the day of the assembly, Denver was hit by a light snow shower, a gentle contrast to the brutal storm that first brought Gary into Nicole's life. Stepping out of her car at the high school, she hugged her coat tighter and surveyed the building's wide steps. People were already filing inside, most wearing serious expressions. She found Sophia in the lobby, handing out small copies of a new summary Nicole had compiled, an at-a-glance overview of her teaching methods, references to research by Dr. Jackson, and parent testimonials. Several parents from Nicole's class stood nearby, each ready to speak on her behalf if needed. "Thank you," Nicole whispered to Sophia, forcing a smile. "I couldn't have done this alone." Sophia squeezed her hand. "You're not alone. Don't forget that." She spotted Christian across the lobby, guiding Gary through the crowd at a measured pace. Gary wore noise-cancelling headphones to help with the echoing chatter. Nicole's heart warmed at the sight of him. When Christian reached her side, he gave a reassuring nod. "Whatever happens in there, I stand behind you." Inside the auditorium, the stage held a simple table for the district officials: Ms. Hampton, 2 board members, and Mrs. Merrick. Rows of seating stretched across the floor, half filled with teachers, parents, and a few curious community members. Amber was there, sitting rigidly with her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. Miss Hampton called the meeting to order, summarizing the reason for the gathering. "We're here to address the proposed pilot program for special education across Denver public schools, led by Mrs. Nicole Mitchell, with potential funding from the Bennett Foundation. Additionally, we'll finalize our investigation into concerns raised by Miss Amber West. We hope to leave tonight with clarity on both matters." Nicole's stomach churned, but she stepped forward when invited to speak. She presented her plan in a clear, steady voice, outlining how the Bennett Foundation's resources would be used exclusively for educational tools, staff training, and in-class supports. She demonstrated, with slides, the measurable progress children in her classroom had made using her adapted strategies. Dr. Jackson, standing at the side, chimed in with concise commentary on the documented research. Several parents, including Miss Reeves and Mr. Carter, took the microphone to describe how their children blossomed under Nicole's guidance. Each testimony felt like a lifeline, buoying her against the undercurrent of tension still present in the room. Then came the moment everyone braced for. Miss Hampton turned to Amber. "Miss West, you initiated the complaint. Do you have additional evidence to share?" Amber rose, chin lifted defiantly. "My concern remains the same. Miss Mitchell appears to be capitalizing on Mr. Bennett's wealth. Her methods are unorthodox, more art project than actual therapy. I don't want to see funds poured into an experiment that lacks strict scientific validation." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Nicole clenched her fists at her sides, reminding herself to remain calm. Dr. Jackson spoke up, reiterating that numerous peer-reviewed studies supported approaches similar to Nicole's. Christian also stood, politely but firmly stating, "My foundation is committed to evidence-based initiatives. We believe Ms. Mitchell's approach has proven results. If the district mandates further oversight, we welcome it." When Mrs. Hampton opened the floor for final remarks, Amber hesitated. She glanced at the families who had spoken so passionately about Nicole, then at Gary, who sat quietly beside Christian. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but she ultimately lifted her chin and repeated, "I maintain my reservations." A hush fell, and Mrs. Hampton motioned for Amber to sit. Next, the district panel slipped into a brief recess, leaving everyone in an anxious hush. People whispered in the aisles or checked their phones. Nicole closed her eyes, imagining the possibility that Amber's objections might still derail the pilot. After what felt like an eternity, Ms. Hampton and the board members returned. Miss Hampton cleared her throat and addressed the assembly. "We have deliberated carefully on the merits of Miss Mitchell's proposed pilot program and the concerns raised by Miss West. Our decision is as follows." Nicole held her breath, and she could practically feel the energy in the room crackle. This was it. the culmination of months of uncertainty and fear. She braced herself, fully aware that everything she'd fought for hung on the next few words. The crowd sat in suspended silence, hearts pounding as Miss Hampton read the district's verdict. "We find the evidence provided by Miss Mitchell and her supporters to be both comprehensive and professionally grounded. The pilot program, with appropriate oversight, should proceed. Furthermore, our investigation concludes that Ms. Mitchell has not engaged in unethical behavior. The complaint from Mr. West lacks sufficient basis to halt the project." A wave of relief swept the auditorium, applause from the parents, a muted cheer from a few teachers. Nicole felt her knees wobble, tears threatening to blur her vision. She caught Carol's eye in the front row. Her daughter, bright-faced, gave her a thumbs up. However, Ms. Hampton wasn't finished. She tapped her pen on the table. "We do, however, advise the Bennett Foundation and Miss Mitchell to establish a formal review process, including quarterly progress reports and occasional classroom evaluations. This is to ensure accountability and maintain public trust." Nicole found her voice, though it quivered. "Thank you, Ms. Hampton. I'm ready to comply with any guidelines you set forth." The meeting wrapped up in a flurry of handshakes and congratulations. Amber slipped out quietly, not meeting anyone's eye. Sophia embraced Nicole, tears glistening. "You did it! They approved the pilot." Still dazed, Nicole smiled through damp lashes. "It feels surreal." Christian approached next, Gary by his side. Gary wore his headphones, occasionally focusing on Nicole as though registering the celebratory mood. Christian softly congratulated her. "I knew the truth would come out." She only nodded, her gratitude overwhelming. The auditorium began to empty, leaving behind a handful of well-wishers. Nicole thanked the parents who'd stood by her, then found herself alone with Christian, Gary, and Carol. They lingered in the quiet hallway, the overhead lights humming. Carol took Gary's hand, gently guiding him to look at a bulletin board filled with bright student artwork. Meanwhile, Nicole and Christian stood off to the side, the silence between them charged with relief and something unspoken. Nicole exhaled. "I can't believe it's finally resolved. I was so afraid the district might side with Amber. She seemed determined to tear everything down." Christian's gaze flicked to Gary, who was running his fingers over a crayon drawing of a rainbow. "Amber never understood Gary the way you do. Maybe she felt threatened. Either way, it's over now." Nicole nodded. A ripple of exhaustion coursed through her, weeks of tension suddenly uncoiling. She could almost sense a new chapter beginning, yet she wasn't entirely sure what that chapter would hold. She glanced at Christian. "I still have to make this pilot work. That's a new challenge altogether." He offered a small smile. "We'll handle it step by step. My foundation is fully prepared to support you." Then, more quietly, he added, "And I'll help however I can. Not just financially. I mean, personally." Her pulse quickened at the sincerity in his voice, but she didn't respond immediately. In that moment, Carol tugged on Nicole's sleeve, pointing at Gary. "He wants to see the library, I think." Gary had spotted a sign indicating the school library and had gently pulled Carol that way. They obliged, walking the short distance down the corridor. Nicole unlocked the library door, flicking on the lights. Shelves of books greeted them, the space still and calming. Gary moved inside, methodically scanning the shelves. Carol trailed him, pointing out the children's section with bright illustrations. Alone beside Christian in the library's center aisle, Nicole felt a swirl of emotions. "I realize I've been fighting so hard just for approval," she murmured, "but the real work is only beginning. Training teachers, procuring materials, implementing strategies in multiple schools. It's huge." Christian nodded in understanding. "You've already shown you can handle adversity. This time, you won't be standing alone against the system." She allowed herself to take comfort in that. "I never imagined I'd be working with a philanthropic foundation or that my methods would gain this kind of attention. It's life-changing." Christian reached out, gently touching her arm. "And you deserve every bit of it. The difference you've made in Gary's life already proves that." They watched the children for a while as Gary picked up a brightly colored book and tapped its cover. Carol talked animatedly, explaining how certain books had simple words and pictures, perfect for early readers or children who needed visual reinforcement. Nicole felt a surge of pride at Carol's natural empathy. Her daughter had grown to embrace these new friendships and challenges with surprising grace. Perhaps seeing her mother persevere had shaped Carol's own resilience. Eventually, they decided to lock up and head home. Outside, the snow shower had tapered off, leaving behind a glittering dust across the parking lot. As they walked, Nicole found herself reflecting on everything that had led her here, from the stormy night she'd first discovered Gary in the cold to the nerve-wracking hearing that tested her resolve. She realized that through it all, she had changed too, forging a newfound strength she never knew she possessed. For now, the district's verdict marked a turning point, a signal that her unwavering commitment to children like Gary truly mattered. The challenges ahead were daunting, but a sense of optimism flooded Nicole's heart. She was no longer fighting on the margins. She was stepping onto a broader stage, determined to make a lasting impact. The days following the district assembly felt oddly calm for Nicole. She had spent so long in a perpetual state of anxiety, gathering data, defending her teaching methods, fielding rumors, that she almost didn't know how to handle the sudden reprieve. It was as if the storm clouds had cleared, revealing an open sky she had scarcely dared to imagine. Back in her classroom, the usual clamor of her special education students greeted her each morning, but Nicole sensed a shift in her own mindset. She approached lesson plans with fresh inspiration, integrating new resources and ideas she'd gleaned from Dr. Jackson's research. A teacher's assistant, Ms. Bailey, commented on how relaxed she seemed. Nicole only smiled, feeling a deeper confidence in her choices. After school one Friday, Sophia poked her head into Nicole's room. "We're having a small get-together at my place tonight. A few teachers, some parents. I think you should come." Nicole hesitated, glancing around at the scattered worksheets and undone tasks on her desk. "I have so much to catch up on. And Carol." "Bring Carol," Sophia insisted. "She can hang out with my niece. You both deserve a break." Not long after, Nicole arrived at Sophia's cozy apartment, stepping into a warm buzz of conversation and laughter. Several friendly faces lit up, offering congratulations for her successful pilot approval. A few parents recognized her instantly, thanking her again for her dedication. Nicole felt a mild flush creep into her cheeks. She wasn't used to so much praise. She chatted in a corner with Miss Reeves, who told her how Dylan had begun using short sentences more consistently at home. "He's also humming tunes from class," Ms. Reeves said, eyes shining. "It's like the music unlocked something inside him. My husband and I can't thank you enough." Humbled by the gratitude, Nicole shook her head. "Dylan's doing the work. I'm just giving him a nudge in the right direction." Later, she stood by a snack table, sipping a cup of punch, when the conversation shifted to Christian Bennett and the Bennett Foundation. Sophia introduced Nicole to a pair of local journalists, one from a small community paper, another from a local parenting blog, both intrigued by the upcoming pilot program. They asked if they could interview Nicole in the future about her teaching methods. A sense of disbelief welled up. She had never sought attention, content to work quietly in her classroom, pushing for small changes. Now, possibilities opened before her like never before. Each question from the journalists reminded her that her story and the stories of her students held real power to inspire others. Amid the festive atmosphere, Nicole realized Carol was nowhere in sight. She slipped down the hallway, peering into rooms until she found her daughter and Sophia's niece sitting on the floor, giggling over a silly video on a phone. Carol greeted her with a wide grin. "Everything okay, Mom?" Carol asked. "This party is really fun." Nicole smiled back. "I just wanted to check on you. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself." She returned to the gathering and found herself cornered by Ms. Bailey, the teaching assistant, who asked curious questions about the pilot's rollout. Nicole explained the multi-step plan, training sessions for willing teachers, implementing specialized software, and continuing data collection. The realization of her new responsibilities both excited and intimidated her, yet she felt more ready than ever, buoyed by the knowledge she wasn't alone. As the evening wound down, Nicole helped Sophia clean up. They collected empty cups, tossed plates, and stacked chairs. Between trips to the kitchen, Sophia paused, glancing sidelong at Nicole. "I've never seen you so confident," she noted softly. "Remember when we first started teaching together, how you doubted whether you could handle a classroom of special needs kids?" Nicole laughed lightly, recalling her first days on the job, nervous, uncertain, always wondering if she was doing enough. "I've come a long way." "But it took a lot of bumps to get here." Sophia nodded, finishing off the last of the dishes. "I'm proud of you, my friend. This is just the beginning." When Nicole and Carol finally headed home, the sky above was clear, a crescent moon illuminating the sleeping city. Nicole reflected on how different she felt compared to even a few weeks ago. Back then, she was bogged down by self-doubt and financial strain, unsure if her methods had a place in the larger system. Now she saw herself as a catalyst, someone whose passion could spark something bigger. Inside her modest home, Nicole tucked Carol into bed, then curled up on the couch with a notebook. She jotted down ideas for her next steps, plans for teacher workshops, technology needs, timelines. She scribbled in the margins about possible partnership expansions with community organizations. Her mind raced with an energy she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, she sensed a clarity about who she was. An educator with a calling she could no longer keep small. The scars of her past, losing her father young, struggling financially as a single mother, had shaped her empathy and perseverance. Now, though, she saw them less as limitations and more as part of the foundation that anchored her determination. She turned off the lamp, letting the house sink into peaceful dimness. With her eyes closed, she pictured the children's faces lighting up as they mastered a new skill. She thought of Carol's quiet strength and Christian's support, and how, step by step, they had all contributed to the progress that night. A crisp February breeze blew outside Nicole's window as she flipped through a stack of documents detailing the pilot program's upcoming rollout. Winter in Denver still held the city under chilly skies, yet the promise of spring peeked in the distance, a fitting metaphor, she thought, for the transformation underway in her life and work. She was preparing for a key meeting with Dr. Jackson, several district officials, and representatives from the Bennett Foundation. The agenda was to finalize contracts, address any concerns, and schedule teacher training sessions. Despite lingering jitters, Nicole felt more prepared than she ever had. She'd spent her weekend polishing her proposals, organizing resources, and conferring with Sophia about practical classroom integration. Early Monday morning, she drove to the district office. The parking lot was already brimming with cars, a testament to how many people were invested in making the pilot program succeed. She found Dr. Jackson in the lobby, tapping away at his tablet. He spotted her and smiled broadly. "Nicole, good morning," he greeted, offering a handshake. "You ready?" She lifted her chin. "Absolutely. Let's do this." They headed into a large conference room with glass walls overlooking a snowy courtyard. Christian arrived shortly after, exuding a calm focus. He and Nicole exchanged a brief smile before taking their places at the long table. Ms. Hampton joined them, looking more cordial than at the previous hearings. There were around 10 people in total, all with notebooks or laptops open. Nicole walked through a slideshow that outlined the step-by-step approach for implementing her methods in 3 pilot schools. Each school would have a designated inclusion team, staffed by teachers she and Sophia had identified as open to new strategies. Christian's foundation committed to funding technology upgrades, tablets loaded with communication apps, specialized sensory equipment, and training sessions led by Dr. Jackson and Nicole. Once she concluded, a few hands shot up with questions about potential pitfalls. One board representative asked, "How do we measure success? Standardized tests won't necessarily capture gains in communication for nonverbal students." Nicole nodded. "Agreed. That's why I propose a mix of qualitative and quantitative assessments, teacher observations, parent surveys, skill-based checklists, and ongoing data from the communication apps to show usage patterns and improvements over time." Her confidence was met with appreciative nods. Then Mrs. Hampton turned to Christian. "Mr. Bennett, your foundation's role is significant. We want to ensure stability. What happens if the pilot proves effective and the district wants to expand? Will you remain a committed partner?" Christian leaned forward, hands clasped. "If the pilot is successful, my foundation will discuss further investment. We're also exploring state grants and matching funds from other charitable organizations to reduce long-term reliance on a single donor." Nicole silently marveled at how seamlessly Christian articulated that. It eased concerns about the program's longevity. She felt a rush of gratitude that he had taken her vision as seriously as she did. Over the next hour, they hashed out contracts, budgets, and timelines. Dr. Jackson offered to oversee teacher training schedules, while Nicole volunteered to handle day-to-day coordination once the pilot began. By the end of the meeting, all parties seemed satisfied. A few minor revisions would be made, but the core plan was approved. As they filed out, Miss Hampton pulled Nicole aside. "I wanted to commend you on how far you've taken this idea. It's rare to see a teacher propose something so comprehensive and back it up with real data. I'm looking forward to seeing results." Relief and pride swelled inside Nicole. "Thank you, Ms. Hampton. I promise I'll do everything I can to make this pilot a success." After the room emptied, Nicole found Christian in the corridor, gathering his coat. He caught her eye and smiled. "Congratulations." "This was a major hurdle," she breathed out, pressing a hand to her heart. "Feels like each hurdle is bigger than the last, but we made it through." Dr. Jackson joined them. "Indeed. Next week, we'll begin training the first batch of teachers. I'll send the schedule tomorrow." They chatted briefly about logistics before parting ways. Nicole walked outside, the winter air brushing her cheeks. She paused beside her car, soaking in the moment. For once, the path ahead looked clearer, a pilot program funded and ready to start, training sessions scheduled, the district on board. That evening, she relayed the good news to Carol over dinner. Carol grinned. "So, you're in charge of all these schools now?" "Not exactly in charge," Nicole laughed, "but I'll be guiding the process. We'll start small, see how it goes." Carol nodded, then asked, "Does this mean we'll have more money too?" Nicole paused, reflecting on how that question revealed her daughter's unspoken worries. "It might help, yes, especially if I become a paid coordinator, but we'll still live modestly. I just won't stress as much over bills." Carol smiled, relief flickering in her eyes. For so long, finances had loomed like a shadow in their household. Now there was a light at the end of that tunnel. Later, Nicole returned to her desk, swirling a mug of tea in her hands. A sense of calm focus settled over her. The pilot's implementation would be its own challenge, convincing veteran teachers to adopt new methods, troubleshooting inevitable glitches. But an undercurrent of optimism carried her forward, like a fresh wind slicing through the winter gloom. She spent the rest of the night drafting orientation materials, her mind alight with possibilities. There was no question the pilot program would demand everything she had, but for the first time, she felt genuinely equipped to meet those demands. Each step led her closer to the vision she'd clung to for years, an inclusive approach that could transform lives, one classroom at a time. In a matter of days, the pilot program's teacher training sessions began at a local community center. Nicole hustled around the space, checking that every table was stocked with handouts, resource lists, and small examples of the materials she used in her classroom: textured blocks, picture exchange cards, simple instruments for music activities. Despite her newfound confidence, a tremor of nerves rippled through her. This would be her first time training a sizable group of educators beyond her immediate school. Sophia arrived early to help set up, scanning the room with approval. "It's like you said, life just got bigger," she teased, patting Nicole's arm. "You ready to present to over 30 teachers?" Nicole responded with a half-smile. "As ready as I'll ever be. I just hope they see the potential." One by one, teachers from various schools trickled in, some looking skeptical, others curious. Dr. Jackson greeted them at the door, distributing schedules. Nicole quietly reminded herself that skepticism could be overcome with clear demonstrations and genuine passion. She inhaled, squared her shoulders, and launched into her opening presentation. She began with a concise overview of her methods, referencing the research Dr. Jackson had compiled. Then she moved into practical demonstrations, inviting volunteers to experience the tactile blocks or practice a short rhythm-based lesson. Gradually, she sensed the atmosphere shift. Cautious expressions gave way to interest. A few teachers asked thoughtful questions about adapting these techniques to different age groups or severity levels of autism. In the back, Christian observed alongside a pair of foundation staff members, occasionally jotting notes. Whenever Nicole's gaze flicked his way, he offered an encouraging nod. She pressed on, explaining how music-based interventions could foster not just communication, but emotional regulation. They even played a quick snippet of the lullaby that had calmed Gary during his toughest moments, and some educators closed their eyes, acknowledging the soothing impact. Halfway through the session, Dr. Jackson took over to delve deeper into the technology side. He showcased the communication software with a brief demo. Then, in a surprise move, Christian escorted Gary to the front of the room. Gary, wearing his noise-canceling headphones, held a tablet. Nicole's pulse kicked up. This was a bold demonstration. Christian crouched next to his son, speaking softly into the mic. "Gary's been using this app for a couple of weeks now. He taps icons that represent basic needs or emotions, which the app vocalizes. It's given him a clearer way to show us what he wants, especially when he's overwhelmed." He gently encouraged Gary to tap a symbol for thirsty. The synthesized voice piped up, "I want water." A quiet hush fell over the teachers, followed by hushed murmurs of awe. Even if Gary didn't look at them directly, the fact he could communicate a need in a group setting was a victory. Nicole felt tears prick her eyes. This was the essence of what she wanted for every child in the program. After a short break, Nicole invited the teachers to form smaller groups for hands-on practice. She circulated among them, addressing concerns. One veteran teacher worried about older students who might find these methods babyish. Nicole suggested gradually phasing in more age-appropriate visuals and exploring music genres beyond nursery tunes, citing examples from her own class. Time flew, and by the end of the session, a tired but excited crowd remained. A handful of teachers approached Nicole to thank her personally or request further resources. She jotted down email addresses, promising to follow up with custom materials. Each conversation rekindled the spark that had ignited her desire to create this pilot in the first place. Children needed champions in every classroom. When the session concluded, applause filled the room, and Dr. Jackson thanked everyone for their participation. A few educators lingered to experiment with the blocks or ask final questions. Christian gave Nicole a quick thumbs up from across the room. She beamed, though her cheeks felt hot from so many interactions. As the last guest departed, Nicole realized with a start that Gary was standing beside her, tapping her arm lightly. She crouched to meet his eye level, noticing he was holding the tablet. He tapped a symbol that produced the word, happy. Emotions surged in Nicole's chest. She glanced at Christian, who watched the exchange with a tender smile. "That's right," Nicole murmured, her voice catching. "I'm happy too." A few minutes later, the community center had mostly cleared. Sophia and Dr. Jackson helped gather leftover materials. Nicole sank onto a chair, letting out a long exhale. "That was intense, but I think it went well." Sophia nodded enthusiastically. "You should have seen the teachers' faces when Gary used the tablet. That spoke louder than any statistic." Just then, one of Christian's staff members approached, relaying that a second training session was planned for 2 weeks later in another part of the district. Nicole thanked her, the scope of the pilot fully sinking in. This was only the beginning. There would be ongoing sessions, data gathering, teacher feedback loops, and adjustments. The real challenge would be sustaining momentum. She and Christian walked out together, Gary holding his father's hand. As they stepped into the cold evening, Nicole inhaled the crisp air, feeling a rush of anticipation. This was the moment she had envisioned countless times. Educators coming together to embrace new possibilities for children with neurodivergent needs. And she was at the center of it, no longer just an overworked teacher with big ideas, but a recognized leader. The ultimate test, she realized, wasn't just about passing a district hearing or winning over skeptics. It was about consistently implementing real change. As she glanced at Christian and Gary, and then back at Sophia locking up the center, Nicole sensed an unspoken promise in the winter night. They were not done yet. The pilot's success and the deeper changes it could unleash would require all her strength, plus the unwavering commitment of those who believed in her. February gave way to March, and while Denver still wore a veil of frost, signs of spring peeked through. Nicole stood at her front window one Saturday morning, watching thin rays of sunlight melt patches of snow in the yard. The pilot program's first wave of trainings had ended successfully, and her schedule was momentarily calmer, allowing her thoughts to settle on what came next. Despite the sense of triumph hovering in her life, she felt a strange vulnerability. She recalled the avalanche of problems that had nearly overwhelmed her: financial woes, skepticism from the school district, Amber's accusations. Now that her name was cleared and the pilot had commenced, it was as if she'd emerged onto a plateau. She felt renewed, certainly, yet an undercurrent of anxious possibility thrummed within her. Where would this transformation lead? Carol's footsteps echoed in the hallway. Her daughter, freshly 11, leaned on the doorframe with a curious smile. "You look like you're miles away," she noted. "Something on your mind?" Nicole turned, relaxing her posture. "Just thinking about how life changed so quickly. A couple of months ago, I was just your regular, overworked teacher juggling overdue bills. Now I'm coordinating an entire district program." She shook her head in amazement. "I'm proud, but also a bit scared." Carol gave a knowing nod. "It's kinda like after my surgery. I was happy to walk again without pain, but I worried about re-injuring myself. You just have to keep moving forward." Nicole laughed softly, hugging her daughter. "You're wise beyond your years, kiddo." Later that day, Christian invited them over for a casual afternoon at his home. No official meetings, no talk of budgets. The invitation surprised Nicole. She hesitated initially, wondering if mixing personal time might complicate their dynamic. Still, the idea of enjoying each other's company outside the pressure of work felt freeing. She agreed, and by mid-afternoon, she and Carol arrived at Christian's large, inviting house. Gary was in the living room, comfortably seated with a puzzle spread out on the coffee table. A soft lullaby played from a small speaker, and he occasionally tapped the screen of his tablet to experiment with different tunes. Christian greeted them warmly, ushering them inside. The tension that once clung to him seemed lighter. He carried himself with more ease these days. Carol gravitated to Gary's side, kneeling to help with the puzzle. Though Gary remained mostly silent, he allowed her to guide his hand to the correct piece once or twice, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Nicole stood near Christian, observing. "It's amazing how far he's come," she said quietly. "He's relaxed in ways I didn't see before." Christian nodded. "He's opened up. Not just at home either. His therapists report that he's more engaged in sessions." He paused, glancing at Nicole. "You gave him that space to feel safe. Both of you did." They moved to the kitchen, where Christian poured coffee into 2 mugs. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window, creating a warm glow over the countertops. Nicole inhaled the comforting aroma. For a moment, they simply stood there, side by side, the hum of the music drifting in from the living room. "So," Christian began gently, "how are you feeling now that the pilot's actually rolling? Is it everything you hoped?" A careful smile curved her lips. "It's exciting, but I won't deny it's overwhelming. I have teachers emailing at odd hours, wanting advice. Dr. Jackson and I are trying to set up a schedule so people don't burn out." She set her coffee down, lacing her fingers together. "There's also the matter of my own classroom responsibilities. Balancing it all is tricky." He rested a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone. We'll keep refining the workload. Maybe bring in more specialists if necessary." Nicole nodded, grateful, yet she felt an internal pull. This quiet moment, standing so close, brought awareness that their bond had deepened beyond mere professional alliance. Her pulse fluttered, but she managed to keep her composure. They rejoined the kids in the living room. Carol was showing Gary a simple card game, carefully naming each color and number. Gary tapped the communication app to echo some of her words. Nicole felt a swell of pride watching the 2 children, so different in temperament and ability, yet finding common ground through patience and acceptance. Eventually, the afternoon waned. As Nicole and Carol prepared to leave, Christian walked them out to the porch. The air was crisp, the sunset painting the sky in delicate shades of pink and orange. For a brief second, Nicole worried about what might come next, if another unexpected hurdle would appear. But a quiet resilience pulsed through her. She had survived enough storms to know that, renewed or not, she possessed the strength to adapt. Carol climbed into the car, waving to Gary, who stood by the window inside. Nicole lingered with Christian under the porch light. No words were spoken, but the mutual respect and fondness was undeniable. She sensed that behind the professional collaboration, something genuine and fragile was blossoming, the possibility of opening her heart again. Finally, she offered a gentle "thank you" before slipping into the driver's seat. On the drive home, she replayed the afternoon in her mind, the easy laughter, the synergy among them, the future that no longer felt so uncertain. In the midst of her newfound vulnerability, she found a quiet assurance that she wasn't walking this road alone. One morning, Nicole parked her car outside her old elementary school. the place where she'd first started teaching nearly a decade ago as a fresh-faced assistant. The building looked the same, with its red brick facade and a modest playground off to one side, but returning here felt different now. She was scheduled to speak at a small educational workshop, invited by her old mentor, Mrs. Crawford, who remembered Nicole's early passion. As she walked the hallway, memories flooded back, her early struggles with lesson planning, her uncertainty when faced with students' varied needs. In those days, she had tried to fit every child into the same mold, not yet realizing how vital individualized approaches were. Now, she was recognized as an innovative educator, leading a district-wide pilot for neurodivergent students. Mrs. Crawford spotted her and pulled her into a warm hug, beaming with pride. "Look at you, Ms. Mitchell. I always knew you had something special to offer." Nicole felt a wave of humble gratitude. Despite all her achievements, part of her still felt like that uncertain teacher searching for her path. "Thanks for having me," she replied. "I'm happy to be here." The workshop took place in a modest library, with a handful of younger teachers eager to learn about inclusive strategies. Nicole found herself easily slipping into a mentor's role, demonstrating a music-based activity, explaining how visual schedules could lessen anxiety for children on the spectrum. Watching the nods of understanding from the new teachers felt surreal. She recalled how she used to sit in their place, scribbling notes from her own mentors. Afterward, while packing up, she overheard one of the younger teachers whisper to another, "She's so calm and confident, it's inspiring." That gentle remark sent warmth coursing through Nicole's chest. She realized the world she'd returned to, this realm of classrooms, chalkboards, and eager educators, had shifted because she herself had changed. She now approached each conversation with clarity and conviction, shaped by the trials she'd overcome. When the workshop ended, Mrs. Crawford invited Nicole to stay for coffee in the teacher's lounge. They caught up on personal matters, Mrs. Crawford's impending retirement, Nicole's pilot program updates, even a little about Carol's recovery and bright personality. Near the end, Mrs. Crawford reached across the table and patted Nicole's hand. "You've come a long way, my dear," she said with a wistful smile. "I remember the days you worried if you'd ever make a significant impact. And look at you now." Nicole swallowed a lump in her throat. Sometimes it doesn't feel real. But the kids make it worth every obstacle. They parted with promises to keep in touch, and Nicole headed back to her car, the chilly spring air nipping at her cheeks. She felt a strange mix of nostalgia and excitement, seeing how her past and present converged. The ordinary world she once knew, the day-to-day grind, the humble school environment hadn't changed all that much. But she perceived it through fresh eyes, carrying new purpose and fresh determination. That evening, she was scheduled to have dinner with Christian and Gary at Christian's home once again. Carol accompanied her, keen to show Gary some new drawings she'd made. Driving through the well-kept suburbs, Nicole reflected on how easily her life now traversed these two worlds. The humble school corridors where she'd begun her career, and Christian's upscale neighborhood of wide lawns and stately houses. They arrived to find Christian in the driveway, ushering them inside. The atmosphere was cozy, soft lighting, a gentle hum of background music. Gary peered from behind a hallway corner, then approached Carol, tapping his tablet to show a new favorite symbol, friend. Carol grinned, holding out her pictures for him to see. Over dinner, Christian asked Nicole about her workshop, listening intently as she described returning to her old school. She mentioned how it felt like stepping into a memory, only to realize she was now a different person. "I guess we never really go back the same way," Christian observed, his tone reflective. "That's growth, right? Realizing the place might look the same, but we've changed." Nicole toyed with her fork, nodding. "Exactly. And it's not just me, you know. Carol has grown so much through her surgery and new friendships. Gary is making strides. Even you, she caught his eye. You seem more at ease, more open. A faint smile curved his lips. I suppose I am, he admitted softly. After dinner, they all gathered for a short piano session in the living room. Christian revealed that his late wife used to play piano, and while he never learned formally, he could plunk out a few melodies. Nicole encouraged Gary to sit beside him, pressing a single key repeatedly. Carol joined in, giggling when a discordant note rang out. It was a simple, imperfect performance, yet something about it felt symbolic. They weren't a traditional family, but they were finding their own harmony. As Nicole watched Christian's gentle patience with Gary and felt Carol's presence at her side, she realized she was returning to the same world she'd always lived in, teaching, parenting, forging connections, but with a transformed heart. Her perspective had shifted, and now the ordinary felt infused with possibility. When they left that night, the moonlight cast soft shadows on Christian's lawn. Nicole glanced back at the porch, catching Christian's wave. The ordinary world might be the same in its routines, but for her, everything had become fundamentally new. As spring inched closer, Nicole's pilot program steadily grew. More teachers volunteered to attend weekend workshops, curious about how music, tactile blocks, and personalized visuals could transform their classrooms. Nicole spent long hours refining resource packets, filming short demonstration videos, and coordinating with Dr. Jackson to ensure each school received the equipment they needed. Before she realized it, the city's school board invited her to present at a special session for local media and community leaders. Nervous excitement coursed through her. She'd never spoken in front of cameras before, but Dr. Jackson insisted this could raise awareness and possibly attract additional funding for the pilot's second phase. On the day of the presentation, she dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy blouse and slacks that struck a balance between professional and approachable. Carol, proud of her mother, teased, "Soon you'll be a TV star. Don't forget us little folks." Nicole laughed, shaking off the nerves. At the board meeting, local reporters from a few Denver stations waited with notepads and cameras. Nicole began by outlining the pilot's progress. She introduced Miss Bailey, one of the newly trained teachers, who shared anecdotes about a non-verbal student who'd started using picture cards to request snacks and breaks. A short video clip showcased the child's beaming face, generating soft murmurs of approval from the audience. Midway through her talk, Nicole noticed Christian enter the back of the room. He stayed discreet, letting her command the stage. His presence, though calm and steady, gave her a surprising boost of confidence. She spoke freely about the program's moral core, honoring each child's individuality while pushing for system-wide change. Reporters asked questions about budget sustainability, teacher buy-in, and scale. Nicole answered patiently, explaining the importance of thorough teacher training, consistent evaluation, and flexible funding sources. Dr. Jackson backed her up with statistics from reputable journals, while Ms. Bailey delivered a heartfelt testimonial about how her students were flourishing. By the time she concluded, Nicole felt an electric energy in the room. The board members applauded, and a few reporters stepped forward, requesting interviews. She sidestepped to the hallway to catch her breath, leaning against a wall. That's when Christian approached, quietly offering a bottle of water. "You did great," he said, pride glinting in his eyes. She took the water, relief washing over her. "Thanks. It was nerve-wracking, but I'm glad we got the message out," he gave a soft chuckle. "I'm sure local news segments will eat this up. Innovative teacher transforms special ed. It's good for the pilot, and more importantly, for the kids." She sipped her water, feeling a surge of gratitude. As attention around her pilot grew, it struck her that the knowledge she once kept within a single classroom was now reaching an entire community. She was sharing not just lessons, but hope and empathy, encouraging others to believe in children who'd been too often overlooked. Later that evening, after the board meeting adjourned, she stayed behind to finalize details with a few board members. Ms. Hampton, who had once led the investigation, smiled warmly as she said goodbye. "You're doing important work, Ms. Mitchell. I'm glad we trusted you." Nicole packed up her materials, stepping out into the cool evening air. Christian lingered in the parking lot, leaning against his car. "Need a ride?" he asked casually, though there was a note of genuine concern in his voice. "I drove myself," she replied, gesturing to her own car. But she found herself walking closer to him, sharing the moment of post-presentation calm. A few staffers trickled out of the building, their voices echoing across the asphalt. They stood beneath a flickering street lamp, the faint glow illuminating Christian's face. Nicole shifted the folders in her arms, her gaze drifting toward him. "Thank you for everything," she began, her voice quiet. "Not just funding, but your support. It means more than you know." He reached out, gently touching her upper arm. "It's been a privilege, really. And not just because of Gary. You've opened my eyes to what true, inclusive education can be. That's something I want to stand behind wholeheartedly." A flutter tightened in Nicole's chest, equal parts excitement and vulnerability. She caught his gaze, searching for the right words to express the swirl of emotions within her: admiration, gratitude, and something deeper. "I'm glad," she whispered, feeling a shy smile tug her lips. "This pilot is changing lives, but it's also changed mine." His eyes softened, and for an instant they seemed poised on the edge of a more personal confession. A shared awareness hung in the air, acknowledging how their lives had intertwined in a matter of months, bound by a mission, yet also drawn by a quiet mutual understanding. Suddenly, the rumble of a passing car broke the spell. Nicole stepped back, clearing her throat. "I should get home. Carol's probably wondering if I'll stop for takeout." Christian let his hand drop. "I understand. Let's talk soon." She gave him one last grateful smile, then climbed into her car. Pulling out of the parking lot, she reflected on how far she'd come. She was more than an educator. She was someone who had found the courage to share her lessons with an entire community, forging bonds that went beyond a mere classroom. And in that sharing, she sensed the seeds of a broader transformation, not just in the district's approach to special education, but in her own heart. April arrived in a rush of sunshine and blossoming trees, breathing new color into Denver's streets. Nicole awoke one Saturday to a warm breeze drifting through an open window, a welcome contrast to the snow-choked nights she remembered when Gary first appeared on her doorstep. The city itself felt renewed, and she saw it reflected in her life as well. She and Carol were headed to a community open house event organized by Christian's Foundation to celebrate the pilot's early successes. With several teachers already implementing Nicole's methods, initial data showed measurable progress. Children who had never spoken were using communication cards. Once anxious students were starting their days with calming music rituals. It was enough to bring tears to Nicole's eyes whenever she read the updates. The open house took place in a spacious public library with wide windows that flooded the room with natural light. Displays highlighted children's art, classroom photos, and testimonials. Families walked among the tables, chatting with educators. Carol volunteered at a corner station, demonstrating tactile blocks to curious parents. Nicole, in a summery blouse, greeted visitors near a poster summarizing the program's mission. Near midday, she spotted Christian standing by a display of new tablet interfaces. Gary stood beside him, quietly exploring the device. Christian caught her eye and motioned for her to join them. "This turnout is great," he said as she approached. "Better than I expected. People really want to learn about these methods." Nicole nodded, scanning the room. "It's humbling. I never imagined the pilot would gain so much attention so quickly, but it shows how strong the demand is for inclusive strategies." Gary tapped a picture on the tablet, producing a chirpy, excited sound. Nicole smiled, glancing down at him. "Are you excited, Gary?" The boy's lips curved slightly, and he tapped again, repeating the same symbol. Christian's gaze shone with quiet affection. "He's come such a long way in a few short months. I hardly recognize the timid child who ran away in that storm." As if summoned by the memory, Nicole suddenly felt the ghost of winter's chill, the recollection of cradling Gary in her living room, terrified for his well-being. She cast a grateful look at Christian. "I'm happy he's found stability. He deserves it." The event proceeded smoothly, with short presentations and heartfelt stories shared at a small podium. Ms. Hampton even delivered a brief speech, praising Nicole for spearheading a pioneering approach in Denver's public schools. By the time late afternoon arrived, the crowd began to thin, many leaving inspired by the potential of the pilot. Nicole headed outside for a breath of fresh air, slipping away from the lingering chatter. She perched on a low brick wall near the library entrance, gazing at the budding trees overhead. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. A lightness filled her chest, the feeling of crossing a threshold she hadn't known existed. Before long, Christian joined her, hands in his pockets. "Escaping the crowd," he teased gently. She smiled, letting the soft breeze ruffle her hair. "Just needed a moment to digest all this. So many people, so many stories. I'm overwhelmed, but in the best way." He settled beside her, shoulders nearly touching. "The pilot is succeeding, Nicole, and you're the heart of it. But how are you really? You've been working non-stop." She considered the question, appreciating his genuine concern. "I'm tired but fulfilled. Seeing these families, hearing that their kids feel heard for the first time, makes it worth every late night." He was quiet for a moment, eyes drifting to the canopy of leaves overhead. Then he turned to face her fully. "You've given my son a future I wasn't sure he'd have, and you've given me hope too. After losing my wife, I never thought I could let anyone in. You changed that." Nicole's breath caught. She glanced around to ensure they were out of earshot, then admitted softly, "You and Gary showed me I can do more than just survive day by day. I'm allowed to dream bigger, and not just for my career." Christian's expression gentled, and his hand found hers. The library's doors stood behind them, a symbol of knowledge and new beginnings. But right now, her entire focus rested on the warmth of his touch. "I want us to be a part of each other's lives," he said simply. "Not just as colleagues in the pilot program, but as something more." A flutter of nerves and excitement danced through her stomach. She remembered her old fear of relying on someone else, of risking heartbreak or disappointment. Yet she also recalled how Christian had never tried to overshadow her work, only uplift it. She met his gaze, heart pounding. "I want that too." His hand squeezed hers, and for a moment, neither spoke. It felt as though the entire world had narrowed to just the two of them. A quiet, unspoken promise wove through the air, like a vow of respect, companionship, and genuine affection. In the distance, Carol emerged from the library with Gary in tow. They ambled toward Nicole and Christian, curious smiles on both children's faces. Gary tapped the tablet, producing a soft chime of "happy." and Carol nodded eagerly. The sun shifted, illuminating them all in a gentle glow, as though nature itself recognized the moment. Nicole stood, guiding Christian's hand in hers. Carol and Gary fell in step beside them, the four forming a small cluster. They began walking away from the library, heading toward the parking lot but moving almost in slow motion, savoring the newness of shared hopes. While challenges remained, further expansions of the pilot, continuous teacher training, ongoing personal growth, she sensed they would face everything together. At last, the sunlight warmed her face, and she welcomed the subtle stirring of tears at the corner of her eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a deep, resonant gratitude. She glanced up at Christian, heart full to overflowing, and in that shared, wordless glance, she understood that every struggle, every storm had brought her here, to a place of renewal, belonging, and the promise of tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.